Welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy my stories. Earth Under Warranty by James Bryan Love. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. Now let's get into this humorous sci-fi story.
It began on a Tuesday, which may not seem significant until you consider that Tuesdays are universally the most infuriating day of the week, wedged between the crushing realization of Monday and the deceptive hopefulness of Wednesday, and for some reason the universe clearly wanted to make a point. On that particular Tuesday, every screen on Earth simultaneously flickered, buzzed, or outright screamed in a mechanical monotone that sounded like a cross between a robotic tax auditor and a vending machine with existential anxiety. And then, almost cruelly, it delivered its message in the form of a single, cold, impersonal declaration that left billions of humans blinking at their devices with a mixture of disbelief, irritation, and the creeping sensation that they might have forgotten to pay a very important celestial invoice. Your planet is under warranty for emergency repairs. A repair technician will arrive in 9 days. Expect temporary essential outages. Marlene Huffington, who prided herself on her ability to remain calm in any crisis short of spontaneous combustion, dropped her avocado toast onto the counter in a splatter of green mush and ceramic shards. "What the actual hell?" she whispered, her voice shaking somewhere between indignation and the dawning realization that she might soon be legally obligated to offer her living room as a temporary workshop for a celestial employee. Her cat, Sir Fluffington Roman III, a regal creature whose demeanor suggested he had personally supervised the fall of several empires and found them wanting, vaulted onto the refrigerator, casting an eye of disdain at the human chaos below. "You knew this would happen," Marlene muttered under her breath, as if the cat could explain the bureaucratic absurdity of interstellar warranty procedures. Farmer Jim, 3 states away in rural Kansas, was less poetic about his concerns. Squinting at his smartphone as if willing it to cough up some hidden context that would absolve him of responsibility, he yelled at the cows, who stared back with unblinking neutrality that he interpreted as judgment. 9 days, he shouted, spittle flying and mixing with the early morning dew. A repair technician for the whole planet? Are we talking fields, crops, cows, or just the Earth in general? Am I supposed to prepare, or are the cows supposed to prepare? Someone tell me which side I'm on. His neighbor, Brenda, leaned over the split-rail fence with a broom held aloft like a medieval halberd, her eyes narrowing at a cloud formation that, through a combination of squinting and fear, resembled a giant, floating wrench. "I told you aliens were coming," she hissed, voice low enough that the cows didn't even flinch. "They warned us and we ignored it." "I swear, Brenda," Jim groaned, rubbing the bridge of his nose and considering how minor headache had suddenly escalated to a full-blown existential crisis. "If they rearrange Kansas, I will personally write the worst Yelp review the cosmos has ever seen, and yes, it will include star ratings for celestial punctuality." Governments, naturally, responded with the efficiency of a 3-legged llama attempting ballet. The United Nations convened an emergency meeting in a glass tower that offered zero protection from either physical or existential danger, where representatives from every nation argued with a ferocity that could only be described as a combination of panic and mild indigestion. "We must ascertain the source immediately," bellowed an ambassador from an island nation that, quite frankly, no one could locate on any map without a magnifying glass and several dubious assumptions. "Are we under attack? Is this a prank? Is the universe testing our customer service skills? Does anyone have a protocol for planetary warranty enforcement?" another diplomat asked, tapping on a tablet as if doing so would summon a universal manual from the ether. "Because if we don't, I'm fairly certain that chaos will ensue, and while I am happy to volunteer my time, I'm not inclined to accept responsibility for existential instability." The room, predictably, descended into a state of disorganized frenzy. Chairs tipped, papers flew, and one ambitious delegate attempted to staple a model of Earth to the ceiling with the belief that physical proximity would somehow convince the technician to take mercy on humanity. Shouting, gestures, and incoherent statements mingled into a symphony of panic that would have been impressive if anyone had been alive to witness it from a safe dimension. In Geneva, Dr. Leonard Brix, physicist, quantum theorist, and reluctant master of cosmic confusion, stared at his computer screen and muttered through a growing beard of irritation. "It's either a cosmic hair or the most elaborate prank in universal history," he said, tapping keys as though sheer determination could undo the message. His assistant, Timmy, who looked like he had survived the lab coat lottery entirely by accident, whispered, "Should we call IT?" Brix turned slowly, eyes narrowing with the weight of someone who had spent 37 years explaining quantum mechanics to people who didn't care about reality. "IT, Timmy, do you really think a repair technician responsible for the maintenance of an entire planet will be routed through IT? Do you understand the scale, the magnitude?" Timmy, blinking rapidly, shook his head. "No, sir, but maybe the technician likes computers?" "No, Timmy, no, computers will not placate a cosmic employee. Computers are irrelevant." Meanwhile, ordinary humans did their best to process the absurdity in their own unique ways. Social media exploded with references to planetary warranty, technicians arriving, pleas for help, and general complaints about the inadequacy of cosmic customer service. Influencers, true to form, posted videos staring dramatically at the windows at skies that now seemed to flicker in subtle shades of violet and green, claiming prophetic visions that conveniently coincided with sales of kombucha, scented candles, and inflatable unicorns. Greg from Cleveland, a man with the resilience of a slightly damp paper towel, shrugged at his television. If the world ends, at least I'll finish season 7 of that cooking show. Priorities, he muttered, tossing a half-eaten slice of pizza onto the couch with the air of someone utterly convinced that some things must survive, even if the planet does not. Religious organizations predictably had a field day. This technician is either a harbinger of doom or a literal angel sent to audit humanity's sins, a preacher shouted from the pulpit, waving a wrench that may or may not have been blessed by someone with questionable credentials. "I'm just here for the snacks," whispered a congregant, nibbling on a gluten-free wafer with the enthusiasm of someone whose priorities were suddenly both simple and sharply defined. Children, blissfully unconcerned with the mechanics of cosmic bureaucracy, continued to draw crayon diagrams of the technician and ask terrifying questions like, why if they fix the clouds and forget to put them back? Their parents, caught between anxiety and the practical need to preserve some sense of order, offered vague reassurances. "Then we buy new clouds," one mother suggested, eyes narrowing at the fridge which might or might not have been preparing for the technician's arrival independently. Cats and dogs, naturally, reacted with their usual mix of disdain and existential terror. Dogs barked at the furniture as though warning humanity of its imminent fate, while cats stared at walls with an expression that clearly communicated, you had 9 days, and you wasted them. 9 days stretched out like an eternity. Every alarm clock beeped with portentous significance. Every sneeze felt like a rehearsal for apocalypse. Airlines released statements, carefully explaining that they had no idea whether flights would be affected but recommended snacks, mental fortitude, and perhaps a light sense of humor. In offices, passive-aggressive emails multiplied like viruses. To all staff subject planetary maintenance, please remain seated during outages. No one understood the memo, but everyone obeyed, because human nature favors obedience when the universe announces a warranty. Marlene called her friend, Gary, still chewing on a leftover taco. "Gary, the fridge just told me we're under planetary warranty," she said, tones somewhere between hysteria and incredulity. Harry paused, mouth full. "Did it, really? Or is it just Thursday?" "I swear, 9 days until a technician arrives." "Well," Gary shrugged, "at least they're giving us notice. Could be worse, could be surprise repairs." And so the countdown began. 9 days for humans to reconcile panic, absurdity, and a vague sense of cosmic responsibility, while somewhere the technician probably checked a schedule, sipped lukewarm coffee, and wondered if this species was worth the effort. Life on Earth, it seemed, had officially entered its trial period. The United Nations convened an emergency session so hastily that many delegates arrived in mismatched shoes, some wearing ties upside down, and a few carrying briefcases filled with nothing but chewing gum and anxiety. The massive glass chamber, which usually served as a monument to political futility, now vibrated with the sound of urgent whispers, frantic typing, and the occasional exasperated sigh that could be heard over the microphones. "We need to determine the implications immediately," demanded Ambassador Felicia Jansen, waving her hands in a flurry that suggested she was either directing a symphony or signaling surrender to a hostile alien race. "Madam Ambassador, with all due respect," countered General Kwan, a military man who had the kind of stare that made everyone around him reconsider their life choices. "We have no evidence of hostile intent. For all we know, this is simply an interstellar service announcement. Perhaps the technician is friendly." Jansen blinked slowly. "Friendly? Friendly?" she repeated, her voice dripping with incredulity. "Have you seen what a technician can do when humans attempt repairs on their own plumbing? I shudder to think what one could do to a planet, and you call this friendly?" Meanwhile, Dr. Henry Leclerc, who had been frantically sketching diagrams of Earth with arrows, circles, and question marks in every possible color, interjected. "It's not a matter of friendliness, it's a matter of physics," he said, his accent thick, his hands trembling slightly as he held the marker like it was a lifeline. "Consider the gravitational consequences a single misalignment of continental drift could cause." Dr. Leclerc, interrupted Minister Sato, tapping her pen on the table with the intensity of someone trying to summon rational thought through percussion alone. "I don't need your academic panic. I need actionable solutions. How do we protect cities? How do we ensure essential services? How do we prevent—" "You can't," Leclerc cut in, almost gleefully. "No one can prevent it. This is planetary-level intervention. Evidence, data, precedent none exist." Sato's eyes widened. None exist? Exactly, Leclerc said, snapping the marker like a twig underfoot. We are entirely unprepared, we are entirely irrelevant, and yes, it is terrifying. In a quieter corner of the room, a small group of analysts huddled together over a bank of screens displaying satellite feeds, weather reports, and the occasional trending meme about technicians. Maybe it's a prank, whispered one analyst, a voice barely audible over the low hum of fluorescent lights in humanity's collective anxiety. Or maybe it's a warning, or some kind of cosmic mandate. Her colleague, staring at a map of shifting ocean currents that didn't actually exist yet but might, shook his head. We have no idea, the variables are infinite, we can't predict the technician's behavior, and if we could, would it even matter? Back in the chamber, debates escalated to near shouting matches. Are we to interpret this as a threat? Bellowed a delegate from a northern nation, his face red with urgency. Is the message implying retribution if maintenance standards are not met? I don't think the universe works on our definitions of threat. Jansen snapped back. We are not prepared to meet cosmic service standards, we barely meet ours. General Kwon's lips twitched. Perhaps that's the point, perhaps we are supposed to panic. Then congratulations, muttered Leclerc under his breath, because we're excelling. Meanwhile, ordinary people observed the bureaucratic scrambling with a mix of skepticism, bemusement, and a slowly growing sense of panic that they were largely powerless to prevent. In suburban Illinois, Karen Hollister wiped a thin layer of dust off her emergency supply shelf, where she had placed a series of jars labeled technician snacks, a technician entertainment, and technician reparations, as if a cosmic visitor might somehow take offense if she failed to provide adequate refreshments. Do you think they like cookies? She asked her teenage son, who was currently ignoring her while playing a game in which the entire planet exploded in various humorous configurations. I don't know, Mom, he said, rolling his eyes. Maybe they prefer gluten-free options or celestial kale chips. Karen shook her head. You can't take chances with a cosmic repair technician. If they are particular about dietary requirements, we could be in big trouble, big trouble. Across town, Tom and Ellen Mitchell debated the merits of installing surge protectors on everything from their television to the neighborhood water pump. Tom, Ellen said, adjusting the measuring tape against a drain pipe, we can't protect everything, that's ridiculous. I know, but what if the technician has a thing for water pressure? What if every faucet is evaluated individually? I read online somewhere that technicians are meticulous, Tom replied, tightening a bolt with trembling hands. Where did you read that? Ellen demanded. Somewhere, he said, looking embarrassed. I don't remember exactly, but we have 9 days, that's 9 days of nothing but preparation. Even as individual households tried to anticipate every conceivable intervention, society at large had begun developing patterns of absurd precaution and public panic that might have looked amusing to an outside observer with a fondness for watching humans squirm. Social media posts advised everything from wrapping cars in aluminum foil to chanting for good cosmic will. Memes of technicians fixing entire continents appeared with alarming frequency, each one more ridiculous than the last. Technicians juggling clouds, repairing oceans with duct tape, calibrating the moon with the measuring tape. At a corporate headquarters in Manhattan, employees debated how to classify the planetary maintenance message in their expense reports. Do we put this under operational risk? Asked an intern, nervously flipping through a binder. No, said the CFO, looking tired and somewhat defeated. I think it belongs under miscellaneous cosmic liabilities. Outside the glass towers of bureaucratic chaos, ordinary citizens tried to maintain some semblance of routine. Grocery stores filled with people buying items that might be useful in a planetary outage, canned beans, duct tape, inflatable rafts, board games, and, inexplicably, glitter. What if they like sparkle? Muttered a woman to no one in particular, while carefully placing glitter containers into her cart with all the solemnity of a soldier preparing for war. Children invented games around the concept of technicians. They ran through yards, pretending to dodge invisible cosmic maintenance equipment, screaming, I hope they don't rearrange my bedroom. Their parents, unsure whether to intervene or panic themselves, alternated between scolding and frantic Google searches. In one apartment building, Hal Grimes stared at the ceiling and said to no one, we should probably practice bowing. If the technician evaluates posture, we want to be ready. I mean, who even knows what the standards are? His neighbor, peering over the banister with a half-empty coffee cup, replied, Bull, are you serious? What do you think this is, a royal visit? It's a warranty. It's supposed to be technical. Harold shrugged. I don't care. 9 days. 9 days to be as compliant as possible. If they judge humans like cats judge furniture, we need every advantage. Meanwhile, scientists continued to provide explanations that were both incomprehensible and simultaneously unhelpful. The fluctuation in localized gravity, Dr. Leclerc explained to a Haggard reporter, combined with planetary wobble and unpredictable technician intervention, creates a matrix of potential instability that cannot be measured with conventional instruments. So we're doomed? The reporter asked, voice trembling. Leclerc smiled faintly. Possibly, but at least it will be interesting. 9 days passed in a haze of speculation, minor preparations, and ridiculous social adjustments. Panic and absurdity intertwined, forming a tapestry of human behavior that was part comedy, part tragedy, and entirely unpredictable. Every action, from wrapping doorknobs in aluminum foil to arranging household pets by color and size, seemed both reasonable and utterly pointless, leaving people in a state of deliciously futile preparation. And yet, amidst the chaos, life went on. Street performers juggled flaming torches while discussing technician probabilities with anyone who would listen. Office workers argued over the correct protocol for labeling cosmic hazards. Children continued their games, oblivious to the bureaucratic frenzy and partially shielded from existential panic by ignorance and sugar. Humanity, in its infinite absurdity, was scrambling, planning, panicking, and laughing at the same time, entirely unsure what would happen next, entirely aware that none of their actions mattered, and entirely incapable of stopping themselves from trying anyway. The world had entered a new stage of chaos, one defined less by the actual implications of the planetary warranty and more by how spectacularly humans failed to respond coherently. News outlets, eager to monetize fear and confusion, transformed into non-stop circuses of speculation, each network insisting that their interpretation of the event was the only one worth taking seriously. Anchors stared into cameras with the intensity of someone reading the obituaries of all logic and reason, and the lithographic scrawled phrases like "experts disagree," "is this cosmic judgment or a prank?" and "planetary technician alert. What does this mean for your toilet?" "I'm telling you, it's a prank," shouted Dr. Lionel Karp, a physicist with a neatly trimmed beard that seemed to quiver with panic every time he spoke. "The universe is obviously testing us. A cosmic sense of humor? Dr. Karp interrupted a fellow expert, Dr. Simon Valdez, a climatologist who was not nearly as panicked but infinitely more dramatic. "Do you not understand? This could be an interstellar mandate. The technician will evaluate planetary compliance, and if we fail well, we could be erased or rearranged, or worse, forced to buy an extended warranty for cosmic negligence." From a control room below the studio, a producer groaned. "Can we get a scientist who's confident for once?" "Confident?" Valdez snorted. "I haven't been confident since the ozone layer panic of '82. This is we're in uncharted territory. We might all be screwed, and it's beautiful in its absolute ridiculousness." Across town, a group of teenagers huddled in a living room, staring at their phones, giggling and panicking in perfect tandem. "Okay, but what does an essential outage even mean?" asked Megan, tossing a half-eaten bag of gummy bears onto the carpet. "Are we talking like, no electricity, no Wi-Fi, no cereal, because I can survive without cereal?" "I read somewhere," said Jared, speaking with the certainty of someone who had clearly made up their source, "that it means random parts of the world will just disappear, like, poof, entire streets gone, and the government can't stop it because it's a technician, not a president." "Poof?" Megan gasped. "Like magic? Like actually poof?" "Exactly, but also not exactly. It's technical." Meanwhile, social media became a war zone. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and every other platform collectively decided to reinvent themselves as forums for absurd speculation, rumors, and memes. Humans collectively decided that hashtagging was the only reasonable method of processing cosmic bureaucracy. Planet Warranty Fail trended worldwide. People created guides with titles like 10 Ways to Survive a Technician Visit Without Losing Your Cat and Essential Outages, a step-by-step plan to protect your sandwiches. In suburban Florida, Helen and Marvin Patterson convened an emergency living room committee, complete with a whiteboard, markers, and a set of color-coded index cards. "According to my calculations," Helen said, pointing at a diagram that resembled both a city map and a board game, "the technician could arrive at any time between now and 9 days from now. We need a schedule of rotations for watching the skies, checking the clouds, and monitoring all power outlets for surges." Marvin sighed. "Do we really need 3-hour shifts? I feel like maybe a technician doesn't care if our blender explodes." Helen frowned. "You don't understand, Marvin. What if they do care? What if they are keeping a cosmic log of appliance usage? We could be blacklisted from universal repair services." At the local supermarket, panic manifested in the strangest ways. People stacked canned goods in intricate, almost architectural patterns, apparently hoping that a technician, if they noticed, would consider them well maintained and leave them untouched. One man debated whether it was safer to wrap his toilet paper in aluminum foil or duct tape, while a woman wandered the aisles, whispering to herself, "Please don't touch the avocados, they are my life." In schools, teachers struggle to maintain any pretense of normalcy. Mr. Thompson, a history teacher who had previously considered the Cold War stressful, now faced a class of 12-year-olds convinced that the technician might evaluate their personal behavior as part of planetary compliance. "Okay, everyone," he said, clearing his throat and peering over his glasses. "Remember that homework is due tomorrow, and also please don't let the technician see you eating glue. We're not sure if that counts as a violation, but better safe than sorry." A student raised her hand. "Sir, what if the technician doesn't like glue eating, but does like homework? Then you might be fine." Thompson rubbed his temples. "Or not, nobody knows, just do your best." Back on the streets, the minor anomalies in daily life, brief power fluctuations, sudden gusts of wind that smelled faintly of burnt toast, clouds forming in shapes vaguely reminiscent of cosmic wrenches, sent ordinary humans into renewed panic. People screamed at pigeons, convinced they were disguised spies for the technician. A man in Brooklyn barricaded his apartment with furniture while lecturing his cat about compliance standards. "Fluffy, I don't care if it's uncomfortable," he shouted, lifting a sofa leg like it would somehow impress the technician. "We must maintain the apartment according to planetary protocol. You understand, you understand." The cat blinked once slowly with an air of supreme judgment. Meanwhile, in government offices, the arguing reached absurd levels. Ministers debated whether to draft contingency plans. Scientists presented papers predicting everything from minor temporal stuttering to full-scale continental inversion, and military leaders questioned whether their tanks would be relevant if Earth itself was temporarily taken offline for maintenance. "We should probably, position artillery to protect her," one general began, only to be interrupted. "Protect what?" demanded the minister, throwing her hands up. "The oceans, the mountains. If the technician wants to, they can shift the Atlantic into your backyard. Your tanks won't help." But the general faltered, face reddening. "We have to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" asked another diplomat, exasperated. "Prepared for a cosmic inspection that we know nothing about. There are no rules, there's no manual. And honestly, do you even know what a planetary technician looks like?" The general shook his head. "No, but I feel like armor is a good start." In a quiet suburb, Mrs. Delgado organized her neighborhood into a watch system for the technician. Each family had an assigned observation point, binoculars, and a roster of backup snacks. "Mr. Patel, you're in charge of the south hedge," she said, scribbling on a clipboard. "If the technician appears, signal with a blue flag and release the emergency confetti." "What if it's raining?" Mr. Patel asked, glancing at a cloud shaped suspiciously like a crescent wrench. "Then we have waterproof confetti," Mrs. Delgado replied, entirely serious. At the same time, ordinary citizens attempted their own interpretations of the message in increasingly ridiculous ways. Some started stockpiling bizarre items: rubber ducks, vintage calculators, inflatable flamingos, and miniature traffic cones, convinced that these would either appease or distract the technician. Others formed online groups debating whether essential outages referred to electricity, the internet, or the emotional stability of humans as a species. "I'm telling you," posted one user, "the essential outage could be mood-based. If we're grumpy, the technician might just reboot us. Planet warranty fail, cosmic mood check." Life, in spite of all this chaos, continued in small, mundane ways. Grocery stores still sold bread, coffee shops still served lattes with foam art, and workplaces remained operational, though conversations inevitably turned to speculation about technician behavior. The tension made for an almost surreal form of comedy: people queuing politely for coffee while whispering urgently about planetary compliance, or teachers conducting math lessons with students taking notes on the correct way to bow if observed by cosmic repair personnel. One man in Portland, setting up a scale model of his apartment with toy furniture, muttered, "If they like symmetry, the couch must be exactly 2 inches from the rug, and the rug must be square, and the cat must be, well, not on the rug, definitely not on the rug." Meanwhile, meteorologists began issuing overly dramatic reports for phenomena that were previously considered mundane. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced one channel, "there is a 0.3% chance of wind gusts exceeding 5 miles per hour in your area. This could indicate technician interference. Secure your pets and prepare your cereal." By the 7th day, humanity's collective behavior had shifted from cautious preparation to full-blown absurdity. Suburban streets featured barricaded mailboxes, rooftop observation decks, and makeshift signaling devices built out of garden hoses and Christmas lights. Online, viral challenges encouraged people to post videos of themselves performing interpretive dances to appease the technician, with hashtags like Cosmic Compliance and Technician Watch. Amid it all, a faint sense of humor emerged. People laughed at their own ridiculousness, shared memes of technicians fixing traffic lights with giant wrenches, and speculated about the universe's taste in office supplies. The tension between the mundane and the incomprehensible bureaucracy created a rich comedy of errors where humans, for all their cleverness, were reduced to quivering, over-prepared, meme-posting spectators to a cosmic joke they could not understand. 9 days remained, and humanity, at once ridiculous and resolutely persistent, braced for whatever absurdity awaited them next, fully aware that nothing they did mattered, and yet compelled to act anyway. By now, the world had entered a state of chaos that could only be described as methodically unhinged. Government scrambled with all the grace of cats in a room full of laser pointers, issuing memos, conducting emergency meetings, and arguing over the proper classification of a cosmic repair technician. Was this a matter of national security, civil defense, or customer service? In a mass of echoing halls of international bureaucracy, delegates banged fists against polished tables, waved color-coded charts, and demanded immediate answers to questions that had no answers. "Are we assuming the technician is friendly?" asked Ambassador Lane, fidgeting with her scarf and nearly toppling a small model of Earth that someone had strategically placed on the edge of the conference table. "Friendly," replied General O'Reilly, his voice booming like a foghorn in a cannon. "Madam Ambassador, have you ever met a technician?" "No, I didn't think so. They do not negotiate, they do not explain, and they certainly do not tolerate incompetence." "You sound as if you've had experience with cosmic maintenance personnel," Ling said, raising an eyebrow. "I have," O'Reilly replied. "Well, not personally, but I've seen videos of other worlds. It's terrifying. Planets do not survive these inspections lightly." Meanwhile, Dr. Havorson, a scientist specializing in the kind of physics that makes ordinary people feel faint, was scribbling furiously on a whiteboard that had been hastily wheeled into the meeting room. "If we consider the rate of continental drift," he explained, pointing to a diagram that resembled both spaghetti and a map, "and combine it with the probability of technician intervention, we get a scenario in which what?" demanded Minister Patel, standing with a cup of tepid coffee that had clearly lost all hope. "Scenario in which," Havorson said, eyes wide and teeth clenched, "entire cities could vanish, oceans could relocate, and the sky might briefly taste like burnt toast." "Excuse me?" Patel blinked, looking around at the other delegates, all of whom nodded gravely as though this were, somehow, a plausible technical concern. "Burnt toast," Havorson repeated, tapping the board. "It's a minor effect, scientifically speaking, but noticeable if you happen to be standing outside." Back in the streets, ordinary humans flailed with a remarkable combination of desperation, creativity, and outright stupidity. In one apartment complex, residents had taken to organizing technician drills where participants practiced bowing, hiding behind furniture, and reciting emergency catchphrases like, "Please do not remove my couch, sir, it is compliant." "What if they don't speak English?" muttered Carol, a resident holding a rubber chicken as a potential peace offering. "Then hopefully they enjoy interpretive dance," her neighbor replied, spinning awkwardly in the hallway while the elevator dinged ominously. Supermarkets, meanwhile, were a scene of organized chaos. People stocked absurd quantities of items that might impress, please, or distract a cosmic repair worker. One man argued for 2 hours with the cashier over the relative merits of organic versus non-organic beans, convinced that the technician would favor one over the other. A woman in aisle 7 meticulously labeled every can of soup in her cart with post-it notes indicating expiration date, color preference, and potential compliance with unspecified cosmic regulations. "Miss, do you really need all 72 cans of tomato soup?" asked a harried employee, glancing at a receipt that resembled a legal brief. "Yes," the woman said, squinting at the fluorescent lights as if the technician were observing through them. "Do you want the world to fail?" In schools, the chaos manifested in subtler, yet equally absurd ways. Teachers attempted to maintain order, but the constant threat of cosmic scrutiny made ordinary lessons feel like covert operations. "Class, remember that fractions are important," Mrs. Langley said, pointing at a whiteboard covered in carefully drawn pies and squares. "And also, if the technician is watching, please keep your pencils sharp. They are very particular about compliance with writing utensils." A student raised her hand. "What if they don't like pencils?" "Then you will have to hope they accept crayons," Mrs. Langley replied, voice trembling slightly. "Or perhaps interpretive dance again." In office buildings the tension was palpable. Employees clutched staplers as if they were shields, meticulously lining their desks and chairs to form compliance zones. Water cooler conversations revolved entirely around speculation about essential outages. "I heard that essential outages could mean no internet," said Marcy, whispering to her coworker with the seriousness of someone discussing nuclear codes. "Or no air conditioning," replied Greg, eyes darting nervously toward the ceiling vents. "Or spontaneous refrigerator relocation," Marcy added, voice dropping lower. "I read it online, somewhere, trust me." Meanwhile, emergency services struggle to maintain a venue of normalcy. Fire departments, police forces, and hospitals issued statements advising the public to remain calm, to follow standard protocols, and to prepare for the entirely unpredictable. "We remain calm," said Captain Hernandez, speaking to a crowd gathered outside the station, but also, "do not remain calm. If the technician appears, do not attempt to negotiate, and if the technician disappears, remain vigilant for unexpected changes in gravity or cloud patterns. Thank you." His assistant scribbled notes, looking increasingly concerned that no one, anywhere, had a contingency plan that made any sense. From rooftops, citizens scanned the skies with binoculars and cameras, hoping for a glimpse of the technician. Some waved flags, others fired off their guns, and one particularly ambitious man dressed in a full medieval knight costume, believing that cosmic chivalry might be the key to survival. "Sir Technician," he shouted, waving a plastic sword, "please accept my humble homage. I have prepared spreadsheets of all household appliances." No one knows if the technician saw him. The man was last seen arguing with a street lamp about compliance protocols. In apartment complexes, absurd committees sprang up almost overnight. Neighborhood technician oversight group signs appeared in hallways, listing roles such as Sky Watcher, Emergency Snack Distributor, and Official Complaints Coordinator. Residents held meetings with clipboards, markers, and laminated badges, discussing policies for everything from emergency cat evacuation to optimal cookie presentation. "Does anyone know if chocolate chip cookies are considered compliant?" asked one participant, adjusting her badge. "If not," replied another, "we'll have to upgrade to double chocolate fudge with sprinkles, red sprinkles. The technician likes red sprinkles." At the same time, minor, mundane events caused outsized panic. A sudden rain shower in London led to speculation about targeted weather modifications. A brief power fluctuation in Tokyo caused a neighborhood to believe that the technician was performing random electrical audits. In Los Angeles, a rogue street performer juggling flaming torches was temporarily mistaken for a technician evaluating human coordination skills. "I think it's him," whispered a passerby, ducking behind a trash can as the performer twirled fire dangerously close to a parked car. "No," said another, peeking around the corner. "It has to be them. Technicians are usually slightly taller and definitely less flammable." Social media amplified every rumor to catastrophic levels. Videos of cats sitting on laptops were interpreted as evidence of technician evaluation. Memes of technicians sipping coffee in outer space went viral, accompanied by captions like, "They're coming, do your homework." Online forums debated endlessly whether essential outages referred to electricity, emotions, or domestic animals, while threads titled "Prepare Your Sandwiches, Cosmic Edition" gained tens of thousands of subscribers. Even governments, overwhelmed and increasingly irrelevant, tried to issue statements. "We are monitoring the situation," announced one prime minister, pacing in front of a backdrop of flags. "We advise citizens to remain calm and also, perhaps, prepare for unpredictable events of unknown scope and consequence. Thank you." By the end of the week, human behavior had fully embraced absurdity. Streets featured barricaded trash cans, improvised antenna arrays, and makeshift signaling devices built from kitchen utensils and Christmas lights. Households engaged in nightly drills, practicing hiding under furniture and reciting emergency compliance protocols. Offices conducted emergency simulations of technician arrival, complete with motivational posters urging employees to stay calm, keep paperclips aligned. Yet amidst this swelling madness, the humor of the situation remained inescapable. People laughed at their own ridiculousness, shared memes that made light of their fear, and speculated endlessly about the universe's motives. The tension between everyday life, groceries, work, school, and the incomprehensible bureaucracy of a cosmic technician created a darkly comedic landscape in which humanity's best-laid plans were absurd, futile, and hysterically relatable. And so, life continued in fits and starts, a blend of panic, preparation, and absurdity. Every passing hour was filled with speculation, ridiculous precautions, and a constant awareness that something incomprehensible and unavoidable loomed on the horizon. Humans had no way of acting effectively, yet they could not stop trying. The stage was set perfectly and ridiculously for the disruption to come. The countdown continued. 9 days. 8. 7. And with each tick, the absurdity, the panic, and the darkly comedic tension escalated, preparing the world, in the most ridiculous ways possible, for the inevitable arrival of the technician. The first subtle anomalies began almost innocuously, like cosmic practical jokes whispered across the globe. At exactly 7:03 a.m., in a sleepy suburb of Paris, a cup of coffee left unattended on a cafe table warbled. It shivered on its saucer as if the universe were testing the resolve of caffeine addicts everywhere. A sugar packet rolled slowly across the tabletop, defying gravity's usual stubborn insistence. pausing midair before falling back with an audible plop. Marie, the barista, stared at the cup, her hair askew, as though gravity itself had personally insulted her morning routine. Did that just, as she whispered to no one in particular, gesturing at the coffee. Her co-worker Antoine leaned in, eyes wide. It floated for a second. It's okay? Okay, Marie exclaimed. Antoine, it defied physics. It's supposed to stay down. Cups don't float. They're coffee cups, not helium balloons. Across the city, a bus driver named Luke noticed the same oddity reflected in his timetable. His wristwatch had jumped 3 minutes forward in what felt like a single heartbeat. He glanced around as passengers fumbled with their smartphones and watches, all displaying slightly different times. A man attempted to pay for his ticket using a debit card that temporarily refused to work because the terminal insisted it was Thursday, even though the calendar clearly said Monday. This isn't possible, Luke muttered to himself. We are late or early, or maybe both? At the same moment, thousands of kilometers away in Nairobi, a small dog let for a passing frisbee and froze mid-air, suspended as though time had become a liquid and forgotten to carry gravity along. Its owner, a young woman named Hamina, blinked repeatedly, shaking her head. Okay, that was weird, she said, jogging forward. Did you just stop? The dog twitched an ear, still frozen, before plopping down gently. Amina crouched, examining it. Nope, definitely not broken, just time, or gravity, or something great. Meanwhile, weather systems went rogue in ways that defied all common sense. In Rio de Janeiro, it snowed briefly on the Copacabana, startling joggers and tourists alike. A man in board shorts slipped on the tiny, ephemeral flakes, his coffee flying in slow arcs before hitting a suspiciously hovering seagull. Did anyone else see that? He yelled, gesturing wildly to nobody in particular as tourists recorded the spectacle. Snow in July? The woman asked, holding an umbrella uselessly. I mean, I've read climate change articles, but this is different. It's a glitch, said her companion, staring at the sky. Time gravity, whether something's off, something big, and I'm not ready. In the deserts of Arizona, hailstones fell in careful, deliberate 5-minute intervals, landing softly on sand dunes, bouncing in a rhythm that seemed both arbitrary and choreographed. A family watched from their porch, shielding their drinks with trays and debating whether they should run indoors or continue sipping lemonade. Are we safe? The mother asked. Safe? The father shouted, ducking behind a lounge chair. It's hail in the desert. It shouldn't even exist, and yet here we are. Even the concept of time began to wobble in ways that were both terrifying and absurd. In Tokyo, commuters stared at clocks that skipped seconds, then repeated them, leaving train arrivals incomprehensible. A young man, Takumi, sprinted toward a platform as his watch doubled minutes in a single heartbeat. Wait, what? He yelled, nearly colliding with a group of schoolchildren. The train, is it here or not? A child in a uniform giggled nervously. It's time, stuttering. I'm late or early. Takumi cried, flailing, his briefcase swinging in an arc that would have broken any normal physics law. He jumped onto the platform just as a woman carrying a small dog tripped over a floating newspaper. Gravity is drunk, she screamed, recovering only to duck as her umbrella slowly drifted upward, spinning lazily in the air before slamming into a street lamp. Media outlets wasted no time amplifying these small anomalies into spectacles of global panic. Anchors, sitting in impossibly lit studios, spoke in hushed, urgent tones, as though any normal speech might collapse under the weight of cosmic absurdity. Good morning, citizens of the world, said an anchor in New York, adjusting her overly dramatic scarf. We are reporting on multiple localized temporal instabilities this morning. Gravity anomalies continue to affect ordinary objects, including coffee cups, newspapers, and the occasional pedestrian. Eyewitnesses report clocks spinning backward and forward simultaneously. Experts warn, stay alert. On the same broadcast, a split screen showed a man in London, struggling to hold a small dog that had begun levitating. Also, the man said, voice quivering, this is my dog. He just kind of floated. Is that normal? Should I call someone? Social media erupted. Hashtags proliferated like fungal spores. Floating Frappuccino trended in Paris after a barista captured a latte drifting inches above the counter, wobbling as though it were reconsidering its commitment to staying grounded. Time started Tuesday went viral after a commuter posted a video of a bus arriving, disappearing, and arriving again, prompting mass speculation that the universe had decided to prank humans with sport. At a cafe in Sydney, a group of friends gathered around a laptop, watching a video of a cat frozen mid-leap. This is beautiful, said Liam, lifting his coffee cup in a toast. Frozen cats, floating frappuccinos, clocks behaving like they are drunk on espresso. I've never seen the world look so ridiculous. Yeah, but also terrifying, replied Sarah, knocking over her own cup accidentally, which floated gracefully 3 inches before landing on her notebook. I mean, what does it mean? Are we being tested, or is the universe just bored? Humans responded in the only way they knew how, with panic, overreaction, and absurd improvisation. In New York, a man strapped sandbags to his mailbox, convinced that anchoring it would prevent it from drifting into the Hudson River should gravity hiccup. In Cairo, a woman tied her children to chairs with colorful ribbons, reasoning that if they floated, at least they'd remain in a designated space. Better safe than sorry, she said to a neighbor, who looked horrified. Gravity's not to be trusted. Even the mundane became dangerous. Umbrellas escaped their owners' hands, floating or spinning erratically. In Milan, an artist tried to paint a morning sky, only to have his brush drift in a slow, sarcastic arc above the canvas, completing unintended strokes in perfect mockery of his work. I cannot control this, he muttered, staring at his smudged painting. We were being toyed with. Across the globe, commuters, shoppers, and children flailed hilariously in response to the minor disturbances. People tripped over objects that hovered just out of reach, argued over whether a single second lost or gained constituted an official time violation, and chased umbrellas as if they contained the answers to life, the universe, and everything. In Tokyo, a man yelled at a vending machine. Yes, you, are you floating because of the technician? Is this your fault? The machine, oblivious, remained stationary, yet a small can of soda wobbled and spun above it before settling back into place. The man fell to his knees, waving his arms. It's a conspiracy, she shouted. Time stutters, gravity wobbles, and yet you remain neutral. The audacity. By mid-afternoon, humor and panic had fused into a uniquely human performance. Citizens shared videos of floating cats, spinning clocks, and half-levitated groceries, all while attempting to maintain dignity, composure, and a vague sense of purpose. Anka spoke seriously about gravity anomalies while demonstrating hand gestures that illustrated how coffee cups should behave. Online forums debated endlessly whether minor stutters and time required recalibration of one's breakfast schedule. Teachers attempted to explain the phenomena to children, only for the lesson to dissolve into chaos. Class, Mrs. Henderson said, pointing at a clock that had skipped 3 minutes. This is a good example of how time sometimes doesn't cooperate, so no running in the hallways unless you want to disappear for a second and reappear somewhere else. A student raised a hand. Does that mean recess counts twice? Potentially, Mrs. Henderson replied, her voice heavy with defeat. Or not, I honestly don't know anymore. By evening, the global population had settled into a bizarre rhythm of cautious observation and ridiculous overreaction. Minor gravity wobbles were measured with rulers, clocks were photographed in triplicate, and umbrellas were tracked like high-stakes satellites. Citizens acted as if they were conducting a cosmic audit, taking notes on every deviation while simultaneously acknowledging the utter futility of their efforts. And through it all, the universe remained silent, save for the occasional wobble, the fleeting pause of time, and snow in places where it had no business falling. Humanity, entirely incapable of meaningful action, flailed with precision, humor, and absurdity, preparing themselves without understanding why for the chaos that was surely coming. As the days wore on, humanity collectively decided that subtle anomalies were simply not enough and that some sort of dramatic, over-the-top preparation was urgently required. Neighborhoods transformed into absurd fortresses, each one reflecting a unique combination of paranoia, creativity, and sheer incompetence. In a quiet cul-de-sac in Chicago, the Thompsons had taped every loose object in their yard, from garden gnomes to bicycles, with what could only be described as the sticky devotion of 1,000 office supply commercials. George, Marcy Thompson muttered, adjusting the duct tape on the mailbox post for the 3rd time, I swear, if the technician so much as wobbles near our street, that mailbox will stay exactly where it belonged. Do you understand me? George, lying flat on the ground to measure the angle of a garden chair, sighed. I understand, Marcy, but what if he prefers floating mailboxes? Maybe it's like cosmic feng shui. Marcy shot him a glare sharp enough to slice the space-time continuum. George, we are not offering feng shui services to a celestial repairman. That is not part of the warranty agreement. Across town, in an apartment complex that had previously prided itself on minimalist daycare, residents had stacked furniture into elaborate fortifications designed to stabilize gravity. Tables perched precariously atop sofas, chairs balanced atop tables, and rugs were pinned to ceilings with thumbtacks in a heroic attempt to prevent them from floating away. Are you sure about this? Asked a young man, balancing a bookshelf on his shoulder as though it were a delicate instrument. Of course, his neighbor replied, twisting a lamp cord in a complicated knot. I read online that the technician judges houses based on structural ingenuity. If something floats, it's a failure. Simple. Our structural ingenuity? Yes, I don't know either, but it's either that or he flips the living room upside down. Meanwhile, citizens attempted to manipulate time itself. Alarm clocks were synchronized across entire blocks, smartphones were placed in precise geometric patterns, and choreographed dances unfolded in backyards in the early evening. In one small community in Toronto, a group of teenagers hopped on the lawn, performing a strange combination of jazz hands and spinning circles. Step, step, clap, leap, shouted the self-appointed time stabilizer-in-chief, a lanky boy named Dylan, waving his arms wildly. What if it doesn't work? Asked his sister, sprawled on the grass with a tablet recording the event. Then we Dylan faltered, glancing skyward as if the answer might appear on the clouds. Then we try again. Repetition is key. The technician likes dedication. The oddity of the situation spread to government, which immediately seized the opportunity to issue instructions in the most contradictory fashion possible. In one press conference, the Minister of Civil Safety urged calm. Citizens, she said, voice firm but calm, please continue your daily routines, walk your dogs, go to work, buy groceries. The anomalies, while noticeable, are not cause for panic. Your refrigerators will remain grounded, probably. Meanwhile, across town, the Department of Anomalous Preparedness announced a direct contradiction. No, said the spokesperson, frowning at an impressively glossy pie chart. Do not leave your homes. Monitor all objects that could float. Secure your furniture. Be vigilant for minor temporal shifts. In fact, double-check your pets. Cats in particular may exhibit temporal stuttering. Remain at home. The contradictions caused an immediate panic, with citizens oscillating between errands and barricading themselves indoors. A woman named Brenda in Seattle, clutching a large sack of groceries, whispered to her husband, "Do we stay home or go shopping?" "Maybe both," he replied, gently tossing a floating loaf of bread back onto the counter. "Just monitor the bread as you do it." As if citizens' creative incompetence weren't enough, scientists entered the fray, providing explanations so technical that ordinary humans were left nodding, eyes wide, and completely bewildered. A professor at MIT appeared on live television, a whiteboard behind him covered in a tangle of equations that seemed to predict everything and nothing simultaneously. "You see," he said, pointing to a graph that twisted into impossible loops, "the stuttering of localized temporal nodes, combined with minuscule gravity oscillations, indicates that we may be experiencing a cosmic-scale perturbation in spatiotemporal continuity. The implications are, well, complex." "Oh, what?" asked the anchor, struggling to keep her composure. "Exactly," the professor said, eyes gleaming. "We do not yet have complete comprehension, but we advise caution and observation, and perhaps preparedness, but what kind exactly is difficult to say. Ordinary humans attempting to act on these incomprehensible instructions ended up creating more problems than they solve." In a Brooklyn apartment, a man attempted to secure his coffee table with bungee cords attached to the ceiling beams. "Do you think it's strong enough?" he asked, stepping back to admire his handiwork. His roommate, holding a small potted plant that had begun floating inches above the windowsill, frowned. "I don't know, but maybe we should bungee the plant too, for symmetry." In London, citizens had created a network of ropes and pulleys in their living rooms to stabilize floating objects. One child, standing on a chair, shouted instructions to her parents as she pointed to a levitating cushion. pull it down, use the red rope, no, the green one, faster." "Is this really helping?" her mother asked, eyes watering from both panic and laughter. "Of course, otherwise it might float away, and then what? The technician sees it. I cannot risk it." Meanwhile, the absurdity reached television networks, where anchors had to reconcile the scientific explanations with the visible chaos. One morning, an anchor in Sydney reported with grim intensity, gesturing toward a floating coffee cup on her desk. "As you can see," she said, voice quivering, "gravity has betrayed us. The implications are serious. Experts urge continued monitoring until perhaps duct tape." Viewers nodded gravely, assuming duct tape to be an official cosmic recommendation. Across the globe, stores experienced sudden surges in sales of adhesive products, rope, and furniture. People stacked chairs on tables not for convenience, but in solemn homage to the potential judgment of an unseen technician. Children participated enthusiastically. In a Los Angeles schoolyard, students formed synchronized circles, bouncing slightly to counteract gravity fluctuations while chanting, "Time steady, gravity ready, don't break our home." A teacher, trying to maintain authority while floating halfway up the wall herself, muttered to a colleague, "I don't know if this works, but at least they're motivated." In a high-rise in Dubai, residents coordinated a full-scale living room lockdown. Sofas were strapped to walls, TV tied to stands, and small dogs tethered to coffee tables for safety. "Isn't this extreme?" the one neighbor asked, watching a miniature beagle bounce lightly in midair. "Extreme is the only sane response," another replied. Gravity is unstable. Time as well. Time is doing whatever it's doing. We must be ready. Even public officials struggle to maintain coherence. In Paris, the mayor's office held a press conference where two statements were released simultaneously. Remain calm, one spokesperson urged, gesturing to a hovering clipboard. Continue your routines as usual. Secure all objects, another shouted from the side. Monitor floating items, especially cookware and pets. Journalists stared at each other, unsure whether to run with either statement for both. Social media responded predictably. Videos of citizens taping furniture, tying down cats, and synchronizing clocks flooded the internet. Comments ranged from supportive to deranged. "This is peak human absurdity," one user wrote, posting a clip of a man dancing with a levitating toaster. "Also terrifying, also hilarious." By evening, the world had descended into a mixture of panicked preparation, bureaucratic confusion, and darkly comedic absurdity. Humans were unable to act effectively, yet they could not stop trying. Cities looked like art installations for the insane, tape crisscrossed across windows, chairs were stacked into improbable towers, and small creatures were tethered to furniture as if their loyalty to physics itself had been questioned. Even the most rational citizens surrendered to the absurdity. A woman in Tokyo set up a daily routine of walking her floating umbrella at precisely 7:37 a.m., convinced that punctuality might influence gravitational stability. In Buenos Aires, a man lined his street with chairs, convinced that the technician judged neighborhoods on the alignment of seating arrangements. Despite the chaos, a certain humor persisted. The world had become a stage for a cosmic comedy, humans the unwitting clowns. Every floating object, skit second, and a mocat contributed to the ongoing spectacle. Scientists and officials bickered over terminology while citizens improvised elaborate defenses against forces they could neither understand nor influence. And through it all, life carried on. People worked, shopped, taught, and studied, all while conducting absurd, futile rituals in the background. Humanity had become simultaneously prepared and helpless, a blend of ingenuity, panic, and ridiculousness that perfectly mirrored the cosmic joke they were living through. It was clear, no one understood what was happening, no one could predict it, and every attempt to control the chaos only compounded it. But that was precisely the point. The universe, it seemed, had a taste for human overreaction. And humans, for their part, were more than willing to oblige. Conspiracy theories, like cosmic wildfire, erupted across the globe with astonishing speed. In small towns and sprawling metropolises alike, citizens began to suspect that every minor anomaly, every wobbling coffee cup, and every second skipped by a clock was part of a vast, incomprehensible experiment. In Denver, a man named Carl leaned against a lamppost, scrolling furiously through an online forum titled Technician Trothers United. "They're testing us," Carl muttered, glancing nervously at the pedestrians who, for a moment, seemed to float just a few inches above the sidewalk. "Who is testing us?" his friend Leela asked, adjusting the strap of her messenger bag. "Aliens, definitely aliens," Carl said, voice rising. "Or maybe the planet itself is malfunctioning, like a cosmic dishwasher, you know, buttons stuck, water spraying everywhere, and where the dishes." Leela tilted her head. "So, the anomalies are what, like rinse cycles?" "Yes, exactly. Every floating stapler, every weird time stutter, it's part of the rinse, and we're just being swirled around. God, Leela, I've seen a squirrel levitate for 5 whole seconds. 5, that's a rinse cycle for squirrels." Online forums multiplied like poorly coded pop-up ads, each promoting increasingly absurd theories. One thread suggested that humans must perform coordinated dances to appease the technician, with choreography so elaborate it required 3 weeks of rehearsal and a permit from the local council. Another insisted that posting pictures of floating objects with hashtags was the only way to prevent a catastrophic temporal feedback loop. "It's true," said the moderator of one such forum, appearing on a live stream while balancing a stack of notebooks on his head. "I verified that if we do not upload daily documentation of airborne objects, the technician may misinterpret our maintenance efforts. Cats, coffee, staplers, they must all be accounted for. If we fail, well, let's just say the consequences are unimaginable." At workplaces, life attempted to continue, but gravity fluctuations sabotaged routine with relentless, absurd precision. In a corporate office in New York, a stapler slowly floated past the window before coming to a sudden stop in midair, suspended by the collective disbelief of the employees. Papers, floating as if mocking the workers' futile attempts at organization, drifted past with casual indifference. "Oh, did anyone see that?" asked a junior associate, clutching a floating coffee cup as it performed a lazy spin. "Yes," said the manager, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Yes, I saw it, and I know I can't handle this anymore. The quarterly report is floating toward the ceiling. Who approved physics this morning?" "Not physics," shouted a colleague, leaping to grab a hovering mouse. "Gravity is taking a personal day, apparently." Meanwhile, in an elementary school in Mumbai, teachers struggled to maintain order amid time glitches. Bells rang at random intervals, recess repeated without warning, and a small science experiment involving vinegar and baking soda became a minor eruption when the reaction paused mid-fizz for exactly 7 minutes. "Children," Mrs. Kapoor said, exasperated, pointing to the floating reaction, "please stop floating in place while the experiment waits, or whatever it's doing. This is not normal." A small boy raised his hand. "But, ma'am, why did the bell ring twice and then not?" Mrs. Kapoor blinked. "Because time is funny today, okay? Just follow the schedule as best you can, or don't. I honestly don't know." Even university labs were no refuge from absurdity. Professors attempting to conduct routine experiments found that liquid poured into beakers would occasionally pause mid-air, hanging suspended before gently resuming its descent. Microscopes floated a few inches above tables, and thermometers reversed themselves, reading temperatures that were both impossibly high and simultaneously freezing. "This is unprecedented," said Dr. Reinhardt, gripping a floating notebook. "Absolutely unprecedented. And yes, my coffee is also levitating. I cannot take notes because the pen refuses to cooperate with gravity. We are doomed, or possibly hilarious." In small towns, the chaos of conspiracy theories merged with everyday life in absurd ways. A man in Venice tied his gondola to the dock with triple knots and chains, reasoning that if the canals temporarily reverse flowed due to gravitational flux, at least the gondola wouldn't drift into the lagoon. "Better safe than floating," he muttered, glancing at a seagull hovering midair while looking at him judgmentally. Meanwhile, in Sydney, a cult calling themselves the Gravity Guardians gathered in a park, performing synchronized chants and gestures designed to stabilize local gravitational anomalies. "Upward, downward, side to side," shouted the leader, waving his arms like a conductor possessed by the spirit of chaos. A participant, a teenager wearing a cape made of old newspapers, asked, "What if it doesn't work?" Then, the leader replied gravely, "We perform the ritual again and again and again until the technician is satisfied or until we levitate entirely. It is acceptable." Ordinary citizens attempted to follow advice from these self-proclaimed experts, often producing results far worse than the original problems. In Toronto, a man attempted to anchor his car with dozens of ropes to prevent it from floating during minor gravitational surges. Unfortunately, the ropes tangled with power lines, causing a spectacular blackout across half a city block. "Why do we even own electricity?" he muttered, staring at the flickering street lights. "I just wanted my car to stay put. Why is nothing easy?" Social media recorded these incidents with gleeful horror. Videos of floating staplers, spinning coffee cups, and office chairs drifting mid-meeting became viral sensations. Ordinary people began competing for the most ridiculous preventative measures, from duct-tape cats to levitation-assistant yoga poses. The line between survival and comedy blurred to invisibility. In a law firm in Chicago, associates tried to conduct a routine meeting, only to find their office chairs slowly drifting apart. "Can someone anchor the chairs?" shouted the senior partner, swatting at a drifting pen. "I tried," a junior associate said, gripping a levitating briefcase. "But gravity, you know." "Gravity broken," another added, watching a floating stapler lazily circle the conference table. "We might as well file this under acts of cosmic incompetence." Schools faced similar absurdities. A high school chemistry lab in Paris became a battlefield of suspended flasks, gravity-defying Bunsen burners, and students clinging to floating chairs. Teachers were left muttering instructions that made sense only in an alternate dimension where logic was optional. "Class, please stop using the floor as a trampoline for your beakers," Mrs. LeBlanc shouted, dodging a suspended test tube. "Gravity is, well, it's behaving poorly. Just cooperate if you can." Students responded with the gleeful chaos unique to youth confronted with the inexplicable. Some clutched chairs as they floated, others attempted to measure time fluctuations with rulers and watches, and a few began improvising small rituals involving chanting and synchronized hand movements. "Do you think this works?" the girl asked her friend, holding a pencil that spun midair like a mini space shuttle. "Probably not," her friend said, eyes wide. "But we have to try, or else." Life outside of work and school was no less absurd. Coffee shops, grocery stores, and public transportation all became arenas of minor chaos. In Berlin, a barista shouted her floating latte. "Stay down, you're supposed to be caffeinating people, not defying physics." A customer nearby laughed nervously, holding a cup that had drifted halfway to the ceiling. "This is terrifying," she said. "But also kind of beautiful, like a ballet of absurdity." And through it all, humans attempted to maintain decorum, order, and sanity while failing spectacularly. Everywhere, floating objects, skipped seconds, and minor gravitational hiccups created a comedy of errors with consequences both practical and existential. Ordinary citizens flailed, argued, and improvised in equal measure. By the end of the day, conspiracy theories had taken root in every corner of the globe. People were convinced that extraterrestrials were judging their every move, that the planet itself had somehow developed mechanical malfunctions, and that small, elaborate rituals might be the only path to survival. Workplaces teetered between functionality and chaos, schools became stages of minor disasters, and society collectively accepted the absurdities, both terrifying and hilarious. Humans, for their part, did what they always did best. They attempted to act decisively in the face of incomprehensible forces and failed in ways so spectacularly ridiculous that the universe itself might have paused to laugh. It was clear that the technicians' arrival would be met with not preparedness, but a spectacular display of human overreaction, complete with floating cats, wobbly staplers, and rituals so absurd that even the most dedicated participants couldn't fully explain why they mattered. Life had become unstable, comedic, and perfectly unbalanced, setting the stage for the next chapter in humanity's descent into controlled chaos. As the ninth day crept closer, a sort of collective mania gripped humanity with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. People around the world had developed a new daily routine: wake up, check for floating objects, document anomalies, repeat. And in between these obsessive rituals, they attempted to prepare for a technician whose motives and abilities remained entirely unknowable. In a small town in Idaho, neighbors had convened what they proudly called the Gravity and Temporal Stabilization Committee, which met on alternating evenings to discuss strategies ranging from duct-taping streetlights to orchestrating neighborhood-wide dance sequences. "I'm telling you, George," one member said, tapping a clipboard as if it contained the secrets of the universe, "if we don't monitor every single object in the yard, the technician will assume negligence and bad things will happen, maybe catastrophic, probably embarrassing, definitely expensive." George, who had been nervously adjusting a rope that suspended a lawn gnome midair, glanced around at the other committee members. "Are we sure that's how he works?" "Of course," said a woman named Beatrice, holding a pair of binoculars to her eyes while scanning the horizon for floating objects. "The internet said so, and you know the internet never lies. Also, I read somewhere that wearing socks on your hands helps stabilize temporal fluctuations, so mandatory." Nearby, a teenager rolled his eyes as he attempted to photograph an umbrella that had inexplicably hovered 3 inches above the sidewalk for the past 20 minutes. "Why are we even doing this?" he muttered. "It's just an umbrella. It's like floating slightly. No one is going to notice." "Quiet," hissed his mother, adjusting the tangle of ropes that stretched across the yard. "Documentation is essential. If you fail to document, you fail humanity. Do you want to fail humanity, Hal?" Meanwhile, in a high-rise apartment in Tokyo, residents had turned their collective obsession into an engineering nightmare. Tables and chairs were tethered with elastic bands to prevent them from floating, while lamps, books, and potted plants hovered slightly above surfaces, suspended in a delicate balance between gravity and panic-induced ingenuity. A man wearing a helmet made of aluminum foil shouted instructions from the doorway. "Make sure the blender is anchored, and the cats, don't forget the cats. If they float, that's well, just don't let them float." A child clutched a levitating textbook. "But it's already floating, Dad." "Exactly," the man barked. "That's why we must counterfloat it. More ropes, more duct tape. Do it, now." On social media, the chaos was both catalogued and amplified. People posted photos of their preparations with hashtags that were rapidly trending across multiple platforms. Videos showed office chairs tied to desks, umbrellas suspended midair, and cats constrained by bungee cords, all in a desperate, futile attempt to influence cosmic forces entirely beyond human comprehension. "This is peak human behavior," commented a viral video narrator, voice dripping with sarcasm, as the camera panned across a neighborhood where every mailbox had been encased in duct tape and zip ties. "Look at them, every single object secured, monitored, and photographed as if a galactic inspector might personally grade their property. Even small hints of the technician's presence, barely perceptible anomalies in physics or fleeting oddities in weather mocked these efforts. In Paris, for instance, a light drizzle that fell at precisely 2:17 a.m. caught several dozen citizens attempting to execute synchronized umbrella dances. They hurried to adjust their choreography in real time, unaware that the rain itself had no relation whatsoever to their efforts. "Step left, step right, spin clockwise," shouted the self-appointed conductor of the ritual. A passerby, holding a slightly levitating baguette, muttered, "I think it's just raining." "No, the technician is judging us, clearly." In Sao Paulo, residents had constructed an elaborate series of pulleys, levers, and ropes designed to stabilize gravity in their apartment buildings. Laundry hovered in midair, kitchen chairs performed lazy loops through living rooms, and small dogs wore harnesses attached to weighted objects. Is this really necessary? The visitor asked nervously, dodging a floating coffee mug. Necessary? Shouted a resident, holding a clipboard with precise measurements of each object's altitude. This is vital. The technician watches every detail, every single detail. Across the globe, similar scenes played out with slight variations. A family in Toronto had taped the pits to chairs with lengths of yarn, a couple in Berlin had constructed a makeshift gravity cage in their living room, and a group of university students in Melbourne performed synchronized leaps at 3-minute intervals to counteract localized time stuttering. Each effort was more ridiculous than the last, and each was conducted with the utmost seriousness. In workplaces, humans flailed under the weight of absurd precautionary measures. Floating staplers were meticulously measured and monitored, chairs tethered to desks in an elaborate grid system, and coffee mugs bound with rubber bands to prevent mid-air escapades. A manager in a Chicago office muttered over her headset, "Okay team, remember, stapler's a priority one. No stapler left unmonitored. The technician's judgment is based entirely on staplers. I read that in a form somewhere." One employee held a pen suspended by string above his desk. "Does this count?" "Yes, the pen, definitely. You're probably good." In schools, the chaos bled into every activity. Teachers attempted to keep children seated and focused, but minor time glitches and gravity quirks made routine nearly impossible. A science teacher in London watched as a chemical reaction paused mid-fizz for exactly 43 seconds, then resumed as though nothing had happened. "Class," she shouted, ducking as a levitating beaker drifted past. Please stop hovering, we need order." A student raised their hand. "Ma'am, the beaker is just doing its own thing." "I know," she snapped. "That's the problem." Citizens formed committees in cities and towns alike, each one inventing increasingly elaborate contraptions to deal with the anomalies. One committee in Rome had designed a complex system of mirrors, ropes, and weights intended to reflect gravitational flux back into the atmosphere. Another in Seattle had developed a protocol involving synchronized umbrella twirls, chanting, and the occasional karate kick to stabilize time in their neighborhood. "Are we sure this works?" asked a hesitant member, balancing a floating garden gnome. "Of course," the committee leader said confidently. "The technician rewards dedication, precision, anti-enthusiasm, and maybe duct tape, always duct tape." Meanwhile, small cults formed with feverish dedication. Their rituals, intended to appease the technician, involved chants, coordinated movements, and offerings of bizarre items like levitating bread, spinning office chairs, and tethered cats. Members documented everything meticulously on social media, convinced that online validation was a form of cosmic merit. Today, the cats remain tethered for precisely 37 minutes and 22 seconds, announced a cult leader. "That is excellent. I believe we have earned approval." "Or maybe the technician just doesn't care," whispered a recruit who was clinging to a floating chair. "No, you dare question the cosmic mandate," the leader hissed, glaring as a levitating stapler drifted by like a mockingbird. Despite the chaos, life limped along. Stores, offices, schools, and homes all functioned in parallel with the absurd preparations. The contrast between routine human activities and elaborate, ineffective rituals created a continuous comedy of errors. A mail carrier in New York struggled to deliver letters while dodging floating mailboxes. A baker in Paris attempted to frost cakes as rolling dough hovered inches above the counter, and a bus driver in Delhi navigated streets where traffic lights occasionally paused mid-change. "It's fine," the bus driver muttered to himself, gripping the wheel of a vehicle that gently floated above the asphalt. "We're fine, totally fine, probably, maybe." Small hints of the technician's influence continued to appear at random, just enough to mock humanity's preparations. A single bird might hover in place for a moment too long, a puddle might swell inexplicably, or a gust of wind might briefly suspend a newspaper mid-air. Humans interpreted these signs as either approval or warning, though in reality they meant nothing. By the end of the day, the stage was set. Humans had flailed spectacularly in the face of incomprehensible forces, creating a universe that teetered between normality and absurd chaos. Life had become simultaneously structured and ridiculous, a bizarre ballet of cosmic futility. Every rope, tethered pet, and synchronized dance had no measurable effect on reality, but they provided a rich source of darkly comedic tension. And so, as the arrival day of the technician drew nearer, humanity continued its farcical preparations with obsessive zeal. Citizens photographed floating objects, performed elaborate rituals, and obsessively documented minor anomalies, utterly convinced that their efforts mattered, even as reality whispered a quiet, mocking no. Daily life teetered between normality and absurd chaos, and the humor of human overreaction was firmly cemented, ready to escalate in the chapters to come. The technician arrived without ceremony, without spectacle, and without the faintest hint of cosmic drama. There was no blaring trumpet fanfare, no spaceship descending from the heavens, no ominous music to accompany this universal service call. Instead, the first sign was a barely perceptible shimmer in the sky above a small town in Nebraska, like a heatwave that had learned to exist without permission. Alongside it, a hum not menacing, not musical, just bureaucratically humming rippled across the atmosphere, the sort of sound that made humans instinctively glance up and mutter, "Whoa, that's probably not good." Within seconds, tweets, Instagram stories, and live streams exploded globally as people realized that the technician was, in fact, already present. A man named Harold, crouched behind his car in the parking lot of a local grocery store, held up his phone like a shield. It's happening, it's really happening, he yelled to his friend, Sarah, who was trying to balance a bag of groceries in one hand and a floating umbrella in the other. Sarah squinted skyward, her voice pitched somewhere between disbelief and sarcasm. "What exactly is happening, Harold? I see shimmer, I hear a bureaucratic hum, that's it, that's our alien apocalypse." "Yes," Harold said, gesturing wildly toward the sky. "But the shimmer, you have to understand, the shimmer is bad, the shimmer means business." Above them, the technician moved with the deliberateness of a janitor checking a vacuum cleaner. They wore dull grey jumpsuits, pocket stuffed with instruments that looked simultaneously important and completely irrelevant. On the back, in blocky, corporate-style lettering, it read, "Cosmic Repair Crew Authorized Personnel Only." Their hands fiddled with invisible levers twisting knobs in the air that had no visible counterparts. To the average human eye, it looked as though someone was waving at the cards, muttering under their breath, "Sloppy planetary maintenance, slightly negligent, gravity's off again." A child, sitting cross-legged on the curb with an ice cream cone wobbling precariously, whispered to their older brother, "Are they gangry?" The brother, who had been trying to tether his small dog to a parking meter to prevent spontaneous levitation, squinted up at the technician and shrugged. "I don't think they care about us, they look bored." This assessment was, as it turned out, dangerously accurate. The technician did not shout, did not gesticulate wildly, and did not issue warnings. They did not pause for human recognition, approval, or panic-induced commentary. People screamed, pointed, and tripped over each other in futile attempts to interpret what was happening, while the technician adjusted the tilt of an entire city with the nonchalant flick of a wrist. A residential block in Denver disappeared, then reappeared 2 minutes later at an angle that defied city planning conventions, leaving a trio of construction workers blinking at an apartment building perched uncomfortably on a 20-degree incline. "What the hell?" shouted one worker, holding a jackhammer like a weapon. "Did the city just rotate?" Another, peering through safety goggles that were rapidly becoming useless, groaned. "I told management we should have reinforced the scaffolding. Now look at this mess. Look at it." Nearby, a woman who had been live streaming from her balcony screamed into her camera, her tones somewhere between documentary narration and hysteria. Yes, everyone, see, it's real, the technician is here, our city has shifted, my latte is floating, it's dripping on the balcony railing." The technician, as if on cue, muttered, "Terribly sloppy maintenance, someone's clocks are 39 seconds off again," and then moved on, oblivious to the audience of panicked humans, never once acknowledging their fear or excitement. In grocery stores, the consequences of the technician's subtle yet pervasive adjustments were immediately apparent. A woman in Minneapolis opened a refrigerator door to find the shelves rearranged mid-rotation. A carton of eggs hovered 3 inches above the top shelf before spiraling down slowly and landing with dramatic inevitability on a loaf of bread. "Ma'am, are you okay?" asked an employee, ducking as a can of beans floated past at head height. "I'm fine," she shouted, grabbing her cart like a lifeline. Everything's floating. It's somebody's fault. The technician is here." "No, ma'am," the employee said slowly, backing toward the checkout. "A technician doesn't speak to anyone except the registered owner. You're not him." "Oh, great," she yelled, spinning around in confusion as the display of canned goods performed a synchronized ballet. "So we're stuck here, floating beans and all?" Meanwhile, in a suburban neighborhood outside Sydney, a cat had discovered it could hover a few inches above a patio chair. Its owner, a retired engineer named Margaret, stared, horrified and fascinated. "Pick up Kitty," Margaret muttered, attempting to grasp the hovering animal. "No, don't, that's not gravity, you're not supposed to do that." The cat, naturally, ignored her, swiveling in midair with complete disdain. Margaret sighed and pulled out her phone, quickly dialing the local authorities. "Yes, hello," she said, her voice trembling. "I think there's a technician. Something about the Earth being under warranty. My cat is floating. The neighbors are screaming, and The line went silent for a moment. "Ma'am," said the dispatcher finally, "the technician only speaks for the registered owner. Not you, not your neighbors, not even the mayor, only the registered owner." "But Ma'am, no, please remain calm and document the floating cat, thank you." Click. Humans around the world were quickly learning the same lesson. Panic was not only futile, it was irrelevant. Every shriek, every frantic sprint for shelter, every attempt to protect property was entirely meaningless to the technician, who continued to make minor adjustments with the precision and detachment of someone calibrating a microwave. Applause in Madrid briefly vanished, leaving 3 tourists frozen mid-photograph, then reappeared slightly askew, sending the selfie sticks tumbling in a display of cosmic indifference. In the skies above Cairo, a minor whirlwind of sand twisted through the streets at a perfect spiral. A group of office workers ducked, their files fluttering like captured birds. "What is happening?" gasped one man, clutching a floating laptop. "It's the technician," shouted his colleague. They are doing something, I don't know what, maybe repairing our gravity, or maybe recalibrating sandstorms." Elsewhere, in a small village in Finland, residents watched in horror as the local bakery vanished and reappeared upside down in a nearby field, dough still suspended mid-rise. A child pointed, horrified. "Mom." "Yes, dear? Is the world broken?" "No," said the mother, attempting calm. "It's just technician eyes." "Wait, what does that even mean?" No one knew. No one could know. And attempts to communicate with the technician were met with the same bureaucratic wall, only the registered owner. Banks, mayors, emergency hotlines, and frantic neighbors all discovered that the cosmic maintenance schedule was airtight in its apathy. By mid-morning, absurdity had reached a fever pitch. In Paris, a man attempted to herd a group of ducks that had spontaneously begun floating in a perfect line across the Seine. "Come on, little guys," he shouted, waving a baguette like a conductor's baton. "Line up, don't go diagonal, we have to align." A tourist snapped a photograph. "Is this part of the technician thing?" "No," said the man, exasperated. "It's gravity's our fault." Small weather anomalies accentuated the chaos. A snow flurry appeared in Rio de Janeiro, lasting precisely 4 minutes before melting on palm trees. Wind twisted in impossible arcs in Chicago, sending stray umbrellas into orbit around small pucks. Citizens flailed, debated, and live-streamed in roughly equal measure. "This is bad, right?" asked a woman in Toronto, holding a levitating coffee cup that spun like a top. "Absolutely," her husband replied, ducking under a floating chair. "We have no control, none, zero, and the technician couldn't care less." By noon, the full absurdity was clear. Humans were utterly powerless. Their panic, preparation, and petty squabbles existed only as background noise to a technician who treated planetary repair like filing spreadsheets. Cities shifted, weather performed cruelly precise tricks, and ecosystems wobbled, all with the same detachment as someone muttering about sloppy planetary maintenance. "Sloppy planetary maintenance," the technician muttered to themselves again, flicking a continent slightly westward. "Someone's tie charts are messy, trees are disobedient, oh well, that's how it is." And still humans screamed, ran, live-streamed, and argued over whose fault the floating coffee cup was. They could not interfere. They could not reason. They could not even negotiate. Only the registered owner could engage with the technician, and the registered owner was apparently not present at any of the dozens of floating cities, drifting doughs, or errant sandstorms. The first hours of the technician's visit established a simple, terrifying, and hilarious truth. The universe had outsourced planetary maintenance, humans were not the clients, and cosmic indifference was the only law that mattered. By the end of the day, small hints of absurdity persisted, grocery aisles slightly askew, roads bending ever so subtly, and pets aware of their own unimportance. Humans flailed, posted, argued, and generally failed at existing within the technician's domain. Meanwhile, the technician continued methodically, blandly, and entirely uninterested in human reactions, muttering the occasional complaint about sloppy planetary maintenance as if the world itself were a substandard filing cabinet. By the second hour of the technician's presence, it became terrifyingly clear that Earth was no longer operating on the logic of humans. Streets warped subtly, as if reality had been gently nudged out of alignment, and continents shifted with an eerie indifference to human conventions. In a small town in Nebraska, a man named Phil watched his carefully raked garden undulate like a wave across the yard, his prize gnome sliding imperceptibly toward the neighbor's driveway. "What the hell is it doing now?" Phil shouted, clutching a hose as if it might somehow anchor the gnome. "It's moving," his wife said, tilting her head as she watched a patch of dirt ripple like a tiny earthquake. Like it has somewhere to be." "Well, maybe we can guide it?" Phil said, lining up his rake. "I mean, we've trained dogs. Why not gnomes?" From above, the technician moved with the quiet efficiency of someone performing routine maintenance on a factory conveyor belt. A subtle hand gesture sent a continent sliding a few centimeters, entirely unnoticed by the human jaw except for the creeping shift in local gravity. The gnome gave a final nudge, flopped dramatically on its side, and then impossibly rolled upright as if mocking Phil's attempts. Meanwhile, in Lisbon, Maria's apartment was in chaos. The ocean outside had inexplicably crept a few meters inland, creating a temporary lagoon along the street. Potted plants floated past her balcony, and a seagull circled overhead with the grim satisfaction of a creature that fully understood the absurdity of human attempts at normal life. "Do we need to evacuate?" Maria asked, her voice rising as a loaf of bread drifted slowly past the sliding door. Her roommate, Henrique, bounced on the kitchen counter, attempting to weigh a floating coffee cup with a textbook. "Evacuate from floating bread?" "Yes, the ocean is creeping in. The technician might be testing us, or judging us, or—" Maria gestured wildly at the tiny wave lapping against their front door. "Or something." Henrique sighed. "Or it's just physics doesn't care about your schedule." Across the Atlantic in Boston, a local elementary school was experiencing its own version of reality unraveling. The playground equipment undulated as if in mild protest, swings swinging with no children aboard, slides bending awkwardly toward parking lots. Teachers ran around attempting to maintain order, only to be repeatedly thwarted by the minor but pervasive planetary misalignments. "Class, everyone sit," shouted Ms. Franklin, trying to corral her students onto chairs that occasionally hovered an inch off the ground. "But we're floating," cried a boy named Timothy, clutching a levitating backpack. "Yes, I see that," Ms. Franklin shouted, dodging a gently spinning globe that had detached from the classroom shelf. "Now focus on gravity, ignore the floating, gravity always wins." Outside, the technician flicked a hand toward the school district map. Boston shifted a few meters to the northeast, unnoticed by all except the children, who screamed when their classroom subtly rotated, misaligning the desks and sending pencils drifting into midair. The technician muttered, barely audible, "I swear sloppy planetary maintenance," and moved on to another region with the same detached precision. In Washington, D.C., government officials attempted their first interventions. Maps were printed, emergency meetings called, and a series of highly detailed PowerPoints projected the correct positions of continents, weather systems, and ocean currents. A general, red-faced and flustered, slammed his hand on the table. "This is an emergency. All forces must realign the eastern seaboard, reposition the Appalachians, secure the Chesapeake Bay." A junior analyst cautiously raised a hand. "So we've tried everything. The technician doesn't respond to calls. He only speaks to the registered owner of the planet." The general blinked. What does that mean? Who's the registered owner? How do we—" He trailed off as the floor beneath him gently rolled. Papers flew, coffee mugs hovered briefly, and a fishbowl wobbled across the table. Across the city, ordinary people attempted solutions just as absurd. One neighborhood in Brooklyn had constructed an elaborate web of ropes, pulleys, and weights designed to lock Manhattan in place. Residents climbed rooftops to adjust tension, shouting instructions to each other as the structures creaked alarmingly. pull it tighter," yelled the man wearing a colander as a helmet. "If we don't stabilize the gravity grid, we're doomed." Doomed. His neighbor echoed, precariously perched on a ladder that wobbled with each breath of wind. Meanwhile, their cats tethered with bungee cords hopped from rooftop to rooftop, fully ignoring human panic. On social media, the humor of the situation exploded. Videos showed entire streets floating in subtle arcs, sidewalks tilting gently like slow-motion roller coasters. Hashtags proliferated, continent shuffle, floating coffee, gravity is a jerk. Memes depicted the technician as a bored office clerk with a clipboard flicking continents around while humans flailed impotently below. In Melbourne, a group of amateur engineers attempted to reconnect a river that had inexplicably reversed its course. Heights hoses and duct tape were deployed with frantic precision. "Just need to redirect it back," shouted their leader, waving a wrench. Red alert, someone yelled as the river, instead of flowing into the carefully constructed channel, leapt sideways and flooded a nearby footpath. Wait, we can fix it," the leader shouted, slipping into the ankle-deep water, only to find the technician casually adjusting the entire coastline with a hand motion. The river laughed if rivers could laugh. Even ordinary households were caught in the chaos. In Calgary, a woman named Darlene watched her living room slowly tilt as furniture slid lazily toward one wall. "Gary, are the chairs supposed to slide sideways?" she asked, gripping a sofa that had already begun to float. "Of course not," her husband shouted, arms full of floating books. "This is, well, probably normal for now. Just anchor the cat." The cat, elegantly indifferent, leapt onto the ceiling and curled up as if evaluating human effort as entirely beneath its dignity. At an airport in Frankfurt, travelers experienced their first taste of true absurdity. Baggage carousels moved unpredictably, luggage hovered midair, and flight schedules defied all reason. A passenger, holding a briefcase aloft, screamed, "My suitcase, it's floating." The airport attendant, equally bewildered, shrugged. so we recommend securing your gravity. Meanwhile, the technician continued methodically, flicking the Alp slightly northward and muttering about an efficient geological alignment. No fanfare, no acknowledgement of panic, only quiet, relentless work. Even the wildlife seemed temporarily aware of the absurdity. Birds hovered mid-flight to observe floating humans. Squaws ran along tilting power lines. Dogs barked at floors that weren't where they used to be. Every action by humans to intervene was either ignored or actively rendered useless by the technicians' indifferent adjustments. And yet, humans persisted. Each effort became more desperate and comical than the last. Rivers redirected, cats anchored, furniture tethered, neighborhoods built complex stabilizing grids, while governments issued decrees that no one could enforce. "This is madness," a scientist in Paris shouted, standing atop a slowly tilting lab bench. Yes, the colleague agreed, clutching a microscope that had begun floating. But it's magnificent madness, the darkly comedic ballet of human futility. The technician, glancing at a tablet-like device that appeared to monitor planetary alignment, muttered, sloppy all of its sloppy maintenance before moving on to another continent with the casual detachment of someone rotating office chairs. By the end of the day, humanity had collectively failed spectacularly to influence any outcome, creating an environment simultaneously terrifying, absurd, and hilarious. Grocery stores, offices, schools, and homes all continued functioning under new, illogical gravitational rules. Communities attempted defenses and interventions, each more ridiculous than the last. And above it all, the technician moved with mechanical precision, flicking continents, oceans, and climates like an irritated repairman adjusting faulty wiring, entirely indifferent to the spectacle of panic, ingenuity, and cosmic futility unfolding below. By the early afternoon, the disruptions had escalated from bizarre to outright catastrophic, though the word catastrophic hardly captured the tone of absurdity permeating every corner of human life. In Denver, a heat wave had collided with an unexpected snowstorm, creating a bizarre scene of citizens walking through steaming slush while simultaneously shivering in winter coats. Children played in piles of snow that melted instantly under the sun, only to refreeze moments later. "This is so wrong," muttered a man trudging through sticky, half-frozen slush, carrying a bag of groceries that floated halfway to the ceiling. "Wrong? It's magnificent," shouted his neighbor, twirling a plastic umbrella that refused to stay grounded. "We're living inside a a cosmic blender, and I love it." At the same time, hurricanes appeared inland in ways that defied all meteorological logic. In Nashville, a small tornado spun gently around a parking lot, scattering shopping carts and leaving citizens clutching their coffee cups for dear life. A barista ducked behind a food truck. "Why is the tornado here?" she shouted, as a latte performed a graceful arc over her head. "Maybe it's just angry about our tip," another worker suggested, holding a donut aloft that hovered midair. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, the seasonal cycle inverted with remarkable impunity. Cherry blossoms bloomed in the middle of autumn, shedding petals onto streets where children wore Halloween costumes. Tourists scoffed as snowflakes fell in the same areas where leaves had already turned brown, and pigeons waddled confusedly through pink petals that had no business being there. "Is it spring or fall?" the bewildered man asked his companion, dodging a floating street sign. "It's both," his friend replied. "I think, or neither, just go with it." Ecosystems, too, were in rebellion. In the African savanna, zebras wandered into regions normally reserved for elephant, while giraffes briefly tried nesting in trees meant for birds. Birds swooped through cities to avoid lions that had inexplicably migrated from their enclosures. In Canada, moose trotted calmly through the middle of highways, utterly ignoring honking cars that seemed equally confused by the sudden shifts in gravity and terrain. "I think we're being tested," said a Canadian man, leaning out of his floating car window to watch a moose glide over the asphalt as if skating. "No, I think the universe is drunk," replied his friend, clinging to the dashboard as the vehicle tilted slightly sideways. Commuters were among the first to experience the full absurdity of the technician's handiwork. In New York City, subway trains alternated between floating a few inches above the tracks and plunging temporarily below ground level. Passengers clutched seats that hovered just out of reach. A woman screamed as her briefcase drifted past her like a misguided balloon. "Does anyone have a rope?" she shouted. "A rope, something to tie it down." Her fellow rider waved a rolled-up newspaper. Will this help?" "Maybe, I don't know, just try." Office buildings fared no better. In San Francisco, floating chalkboards hovered inches above classrooms, dumping half-written equations onto startled students. Teachers flailed, attempting to maintain authority while their lesson plans were literally suspended in midair. "Everyone now copy this down," a math teacher asked, pointing helplessly at a hovering piece of chalk. "It's floating," a student shouted, trying to follow along. "I can't, what is this even?" In factories, machines operated in partial chaos. Conveyor belts tilted unpredictably, robotic arms swung in unintended arcs, and products hovered mid-production. Supervisors shouted instructions, which were largely ignored by both machines and humans alike. "Everyone, just grab the boxes," one manager shouted, waving his arms. A carton drifted past his nose, almost hitting him. "And stack them in a corner, anywhere safe?" Wildlife invasions compounded the absurdity. In London, a family of foxes moved into an office building, carefully navigating desks as gravity flickered erratically. The foxes seemed aware of the cosmic joke and strutted confidently past human workers who scrambled to shoo them out. "This isn't real," one worker screamed, trying to gather floating files while a fox knocked over a coffee mug. "It's as real as whatever this is," another replied, ducking as the mug performed a perfect arc before landing on a desk that had shifted 5 feet to the left. Social media thrived on the chaos, with panic documentation providing humor for those not directly affected. Videos of floating shopping carts, sideways cars, and pets gently hovering in midair spread like wildfire. Hashtags appeared faster than humans could process: heat snow mashup, floating fox, subway levitation. Influencers attempted live coverage, narrating in a mix of terror and awe. "This is insane, look at it, one viral streamer shouted, dodging a levitating trash can. "We're floating, the city's floating, everything is oh no, the dog." Even as humans struggled to comprehend events, the technician continued methodically. One hand flicked a mountain into a new position in the Alps, while another adjusted ocean currents with a slight twist of the wrist. "Old climate calibration, inefficient gravitational gradient sloppy," the technician muttered, as though lecturing a faulty appliance rather than performing planetary surgery on billions of sentient beings. Amid the chaos, attempts to intervene were both heroic and absurd. In Sydney, a group of volunteers attempted to tether whales to docks after they appeared in the harbour inexplicably early. "They're swimming in reverse," shouted the coordinator, holding a rope that floated in midair. "Yes, tie them down, a volunteer screamed, chasing a humpback as it drifted lazily along the pier. "Oh, this is completely useless," a bystander muttered. "But also kind of beautiful." At the end of the day, humanity's suffering was simultaneously terrifying and ridiculous. Commuters struggled through streets that now tilted slightly sideways, offices attempted productivity under impossible conditions, classrooms collapsed into floating chaos, and ecosystems danced to a logic entirely alien to humans. And yet the technician operated with monotone detachment, muttering about old climate calibration and inefficient gravitational gradients as continents, rivers, and cities shifted as though the planet were a mere appliance in need of routine service. Humanity, meanwhile, continued to fail spectacularly. Grocery stores stocked products that floated, pets defied gravity, and children attempted to study in classrooms that were partially underwater. Governments issued decrees that no one could enforce, engineers built ridiculous interventions, and social media documented it all with frantic energy and darkly comedic commentary. By nightfall, the absurdity had reached a crescendo. Hurricanes swirled briefly over suburban lawns, snow accumulated in deserts, and oceans briefly reversed direction along the coastlines. Humans could neither stop nor predict the technicians' work, but they persisted, documenting every failure, every floating chair, every absurd consequence as if it mattered. And above it all, the technician moved with mechanical precision, adjusting climates, currents, and continents, utterly indifferent to the chaos, the panic, and the comedy unfolding below. By the end of the initial wave of planetary adjustments, the entire human species had reached a near universal state of stunned, panicked exhaustion, which might have been understandable if anything they attempted had made the slightest difference. In New York, commuters clung to floating metro signs as if their lives depended on it, though the truth was, the metro signs were now drifting in a slow spiral toward the clouds, apparently just for the technicians' amusement. One woman, her hair standing on end from static electricity and fear, waved a fist at the sky. "Somebody do something, fix it," she shouted, though it was unclear whether she meant the floating signs, the rogue snowstorm in Times Square, or the entire universe. From his perch on a sidewalk bench, a man holding a dog on a leash muttered, "I've tried everything," tethered the dog, taped down the mailbox, prayed to some random alien form, nothing matters anymore. The technician, entirely oblivious to the human chaos, strolled across what had once been Central Park, now partially submerged under a briefly relocated Hudson River. He carried a clipboard and muttered to himself in tones that suggested mild irritation rather than urgency. "Sloppy tectonic realignment, old climate calibration, excessive panic levels," he said, under his breath, as a city block vanished behind him, only to reappear 10 meters south in an unplanned but aesthetically pleasing angle. Across the globe, similar scenes unfolded in parallel absurdity. In Tokyo, citizens attempted to maintain normal commutes despite sidewalks twisting like roller coasters. A businessman held his briefcase tightly as it drifted briefly above the pavement. Do I keep walking? He asked a fellow pedestrian. Apparently, or maybe we're just props in some cosmic IKEA assembly video, replied the other, attempting to push a floating bicycle out of the way. In London, government officials gathered in an emergency meeting room with maps and charts strewn across the floor, all of them obsolete within minutes as coastlines slid slightly, rivers curved whimsically, and weather systems pirouetted across the country. This is unprecedented, said the head of the British Meteorological Agency, adjusting his monocle. Our flood predictions are meaningless, the tidal model's obsolete, even the city maps are laughing at us. Should we issue new warnings? Asked a junior civil servant, frantically scribbling notes. Warnings about what? Everything is everything, replied the agency head, gesturing helplessly at a monitor where a hurricane briefly spiraled over Hyde Park before vanishing. Send an email, post on social media, maybe the technician reads those. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens tried to exert control in ways both heroic and laughable. In Sao Paulo, residents attached ropes, chains, and bungee cords to street lamps, convinced that stabilizing inanimate objects would somehow stabilize the earth itself. Don't let it move, shouted a man, tugging at a lamppost that had already moved 2 meters sideways. It's gone, another replied, shrugging as the lamp floated past like a drifting balloon. But I feel like we did something, Marley. Children, naturally, interpreted the chaos as a playground. In Sydney, a schoolyard had become a half-frozen, half-melted ice rink with floating soccer balls. A teacher, struggling to maintain authority while hovering textbooks made loops above her head, screamed, "Get back in line, you're not supposed to be skidding, gravity is not optional." One small boy raised a hand, balancing on an oddly angled swing. "But Ms. Patterson, gravity is optional," he announced proudly, spinning a pencil between his fingers as it floated lazily upward. Heads, of course, behaved as if they understood the absurdity and had quietly decided it was best to play along. Cats lounged in midair, dogs strutted upside down along the sides of buildings, and a particularly bold parrot in Paris circled the Eiffel Tower, squawking insults at pedestrians below. "Call the vet," one terrified tourist shouted. "Why?" replied another. "It's having the time of its life, honestly, maybe it's teaching us how to adapt." Social media coverage had reached peak absurdity. Videos went viral showing floating cars upside-down rivers, and squares navigating inverted city streets. Influencers narrated with exaggerated horror, simultaneously panicked and gleeful, documenting every impossible consequence with hashtags like "planet fail," "gravity optional," and "technician thinks you're stupid." "It's like the Earth is a toaster," one vlogger exclaimed, dodging a floating quasar. "You know, and someone just pressed the wrong button again for the 5th time and no one's paying attention, everything is wrong and also delightful." Even attempts at professional intervention failed spectacularly. In Washington, D.C., engineers deploy experimental restabilizers, giant towers designed to realign local gravity. The first tower tilted sideways as a minor earthquake passed beneath it. The second tower toppled in spectacular fashion, crushing several abandoned cars and inspiring a small crowd of journalists to cheer. "I think it's working," said an engineer, dusting off soot from his hair. "Yeah," replied a colleague, holding a clipboard upside down. "Working against us, maybe." The technician continued as if all this was routine paperwork. Every city that vanished and reappeared, every ocean current reversed or reshuffled, every ecosystem wobbling as animals migrated to new and impossible regions received the same response, a casual shrug, a muttered complaint, and the quiet satisfaction of someone following a checklist. "Outdated urban planning, haphazard landscaping, chronologically inefficient crops," the technician murmured, jotting notes, completely indifferent to the screaming masses below. By evening it was clear that humans were utterly powerless. Attempts to reason, resist, or repair were pointless. Governments, citizens, and scientists all stared helplessly at streets, skies, and oceans that had betrayed their familiar logic. Yet there was humor to be found in every frantic gesture, every absurd precaution, every social media post desperate to make sense of a planet being repaired like an appliance in need of a tune-up. A mail carrier in Rome dodged a floating bicycle, muttering, "This is fine, probably, just keep walking, maybe throw the letters at the houses instead, they'll catch them hopefully." In Tokyo, a mother clutched her child as a minor hurricane briefly twisted the streets. Hold on," she screamed. "It's okay, Mom," the child said calmly. "It's like a roller coaster, but apocalypse-themed." By nightfall, the contrast was unmistakable. The technician operated with dull precision, methodically checking off invisible boxes on a cosmic clipboard, while humanity panicked, improvised, and reacted in ways both horrifying and laughable. Every vanishing city, inverted climate, and wobbling ecosystem became a darkly comedic spectacle, a reminder that when the planet itself is under maintenance, there is no controlling, no predicting, and certainly no dignity left for those who inhabit it. And above it all, the technician whispered once more, without a hint of irony. Sloppy planetary maintenance and efficient energy usage, humans very inefficient. Which, under the circumstances, was both terrifying and, somehow, hilarious. The earth shuddered beneath the indifferent gaze of the technician, a subtle but relentless twitch, like a cat flicking its tail in annoyance. Cities and landmarks no longer held familiar positions. A New York subway station disgorged commuters into sand dunes that had no right to exist there, while a cafe in Paris now overlooked a river that had inexplicably flowed in from Venice. Streets folded into themselves, rivers reversed direction for minutes at a time, and mountains sprouted overnight in the suburbs, displacing lawn gnomes who were, understandably, offended. Residents stood slack-jawed on sidewalks, trying to comprehend the impossibility of it all, while smartphones buzzed constantly with notifications. Unexpected topographical change detected, the gravity anomaly in progress. Have you considered duct tape? In Kansas City, the mayor stared at a map that looked less like a city plan and more like modern abstract art. How the hell are we supposed to tell people to evacuate if the streets vanish before we do? He muttered, pacing behind his desk as a potted plant floated lazily past, bumping the ceiling before descending with a soft mocking plop. His assistant blinked at a stack of now useless GPS printouts. I think we just tell them to swim? Right, because that's totally practical, the mayor said, kicking his chair, which promptly floated 2 inches off the ground before drifting back down like a particularly polite ghost. He sighed. I swear, if someone invents a floating kayak for this, I'll wait. They already did. Half a world away in Rio de Janeiro, a father paddled furiously down what had once been a residential street, a kayak bobbing over asphalt that had briefly turned into a rushing river. His son leaned over the edge, pointing at a neighbor's floating scooter. Dad, look, the scooter's flying. Yes, and we'll discuss the laws of gravity after we survive this, the father muttered, narrowly avoiding a mailbox sucked into a mini whirlpool. Government scrambled, issuing contradictory and increasingly absurd instructions. One nation insisted citizens remain calm and rely on existing infrastructure. Another demanded immediate evacuation to cities that had ceased to exist 10 minutes prior. Emergency broadcasts were punctuated with a single, universally repeated message whenever officials attempted to contact the technician. I will only speak with the registered owner of this planet. Residents, renters, and government representatives are ineligible. Contact the owner if you have complaints. This phrase spread faster than wildfire. Social media exploded with panic memes, citizens holding up registered owner badges, office clerks waving fake deeds to skyscrapers, and neighbors arguing over who had the proper cosmic paperwork. Hashtags like tenant problems, call the owner, and where is my lease dominated trending charts. In London, a group of elderly men stood at a park holding laminated copies of their birth certificates, arguing that they had lived on Earth the longest and therefore deserved a temporary owner's privilege. The technician has to listen to someone, one cried, waving his certificate like a flag. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, office workers found themselves stranded on floors 2 stories above the lobby. Desks hovered midair, coffee cups drifted lazily above keyboard rows, and a junior employee shouted, I think the gravity's broken again. Just be glad the stapler isn't trying to eat you, their manager replied dryly, surveying the office as the copper floated past, unbothered by the chaos. Papers drifted like autumn leaves in a gentle wind, smacking employees in the face and eliciting muffled curses. In Sydney, a neighborhood had attempted to create a gravity stabilization grid using ropes, weights, and aluminum foil hats. Despite their meticulous efforts, a sudden shift caused garden gnomes to perform synchronized aerial spins while their owners tried to document it on smartphones. Look, I captured it, shouted one resident, arms flailing. Does this mean we're safe? Asked another. No, it means your gnome is dizzy, the third responded, ducking a floating barbecue lid. Animals behaved as if they, too, had grown tired of humanity's insistence on control. Birds overshot migratory paths, landing in fountains they had never seen before. Deer wandered into flooded city streets, narrowly avoiding traffic accidents with panicked drivers. Schools struggled to maintain discipline as unexpected snowfalls blanketed playgrounds in deserts, heatwaves melted playground equipment in the tundra, and raccoons performed impromptu inspections of cafeteria kitchens. In New York, a bus driver navigated streets that were simultaneously submerged and lifted. It's fine, he muttered, gripping the wheel of a floating vehicle. Totally fine, probably fine, maybe. High above, the technician moved with methodical, indifferent precision. A bland jumpsuit hung loosely on their frame, and their expression suggested that they would have been equally unimpressed by an erupting volcano or a spontaneously vanishing continent. They muttered occasionally about inefficient gravitational gradients and outdated climate calibration while adjusting continents with gestures so casual they seemed to flick the world aside like dust from a tabletop. No one could interfere. Attempts to influence the technician ranged from government broadcasts pleading for mercy to amateur engineers trying to tether continents with industrial cable. Each effort failed spectacularly. Citizens tied bicycles to trees, strung shopping carts along rivers, and placed weight plates atop floating cats. All futile. All absurd. Maybe if we line up every duck in the park, he'll notice our dedication, the child suggested in Sao Paulo, holding a clipboard like a general surveying troops. Absolutely not, said an adult, adjusting a harness on a slightly levitating dog. Focus on duct tape, not ducks. Across the globe, buildings appeared, disappeared, or reappeared rotated 90 degrees. Sidewalks looped into rivers, rivers looped into streets, and small towns suddenly found themselves displaced hundreds of miles without warning. Citizens ran kayaks in hand, navigating impromptu floods in former city squares while simultaneously dodging drifting office chairs, upside-down cars, and bewildered livestock. Media coverage became a carnival of panic and humor. Anchors reported in breathless unison, "A city has vanished again," while scrolling graphics inaccurately displayed locations of vanished landmarks. Viral clips showed family dogs wearing flotation devices, office employees riding kayaks through hallways, and teenagers building zip lines across rivers that hadn't existed 20 minutes prior. Humor emerged organically as people desperately tried to act normal, simultaneously documenting their failures online. And yet, every frantic action was met with complete indifference. The technician, muttering, "I see some sloppy aquatic alignment here," adjusted an ocean current. Citizens screamed as floodwaters rerouted a coastal city. A man in Venice threw a gondola at a drifting dolphin, muttering, "Do something, you aquatic bastard." By sunset, the registered owner rule had become both mantra and absurd punchline. Debate erupted over who qualified. Corporations claimed partial ownership, families argued generational claims, and conspiracy theorists suggested Elon Musk might have a controlling interest. Every human action carried with it the desperate hope that the technician might notice the correct paperwork, as if cosmic bureaucracy could be influenced by notarized forms. Despite the ongoing disasters, roads folding into themselves, whales floating past office windows, sudden snow in tropical cities, humans clung to their routines. Grocery stores operated as if nothing had changed, cashiers scanning items while hovering birds peeked over counters. Children attempted homework on desks that occasionally rotated 90 degrees. Families took selfies next to lakes that had been rivers moments before, posting hashtags like "This is Fine" and "Cosmic Renovation." The technician moved through it all with utter monotony. A flick of a wrist, and a mountain slid into a previously empty valley. A nod, and an ocean current swirled to flood a city for 5 minutes, then retreated. Muted commentary on suboptimal tectonic resistance accompanied each action. Humans interpreted these as judgment, approval, or denial, but in reality, it was as meaningless as a shrug. By the end of the day, Earth was a surreal, absurd landscape, cities out of place, rivers weaving through streets, mountains sprouting in suburbs, and citizens improvising with kayaks, duct tape, and whisper prose. The registered owner rule lingered in every conversation, social media post, and muttered curse. Humans were powerless, frantic, and ridiculous. The technician remained utterly indifferent, treating the planet as an appliance in need of mechanical maintenance. And through it all, the darkly comedic truth was unavoidable. Humanity's frantic attempts at logic, planning, and adaptation were utterly meaningless against the apathetic, methodical efficiency of the technician, whose sole requirement was paperwork that no human living in a rental could ever hope to possess. Ocean currents didn't just shift, they tantrumed. Entire water systems reversed direction like someone had pressed an enormous cosmic undo button and then got bored halfway through. The Atlantic spun one way in the morning, another by lunchtime, and paused at dinner like it needed a nap. Coastal cities woke up submerged, then emerged again just long enough for citizens to crawl out of their windows, cough up seawater, and swear at the sky before another wave dumped everything back underwater. In Miami, a man in a bathrobe tried to surf down his street-corner door he had yanked off its hinges. A neighbor shouted from a second-floor window, "You're gonna die, Henry." Henry, wobbling on the floating door, yelled back, "Not before I get viral, I'm not." He immediately wiped out when a flying fish slapped him across the face. In Charleston, a grandmother strapped a leaf blower to her back like a jetpack and screamed, "If the water's gonna come to me, I'm gonna go over the water." She made it 3 feet before spinning in a circle and launching herself directly into a floating minivan. Kayaks were everywhere. Humanity had apparently decided kayaks were the universal answer to all water-related problems. People used them in oceans, rivers, streets, hallways, apartment lobbies, and in one case, inside a grocery store to reach the floating cereal aisle. Office chairs became surprisingly popular watercraft too, especially the expensive ones with good lumbar support. A college student in San Diego sat in one, paddling with a pizza box. "Dude, this is fine," he insisted while drifting past a police bird. "This is innovation." The officer stared at him. "That's not innovation, that's concussion bait." Meanwhile, entire inland regions found themselves dealing with weather that made no physical, moral, or ethical sense. Snow fell in deserts, piling up over sun-baked dunes. Heat waves boiled frozen lakes. Windstorms ripped through cities, sending trash cans and patio furniture into the sky like amateur UFO. In Phoenix, a man opened his front door to find a snowman someone had built overnight. It had sunglasses, a scarf, and a note stuck to its neck: "You move." He stood there shivering in the desert cold and muttered, "I don't even have the wardrobe for this." A block away, a group of teenagers built a sled ramp off a neighbor's roof while the homeowner screamed, "Get down from there, this is a homeowners association community." They ignored him and launched themselves into a snowbank anyway, cheering when a rogue tumbleweed rolled by frozen and solid like a spiky ice boulder. Across the planet, governments scrambled to maintain order, which really meant they issued wildly contradictory instructions every 30 minutes. One country's emergency broadcast said, "Shelter in place, barricade doors, do not attempt to swim." 20 minutes later, the same system announced, "All citizens living below 500 feet elevation must proceed to higher ground immediately, swimming recommended." Another government announced, "We advise building makeshift flotation devices." Then followed it with, "Do not use makeshift flotation devices." A third insisted that citizens maintain calm and remain indoors, only for those very buildings to be caught in a sudden micro-whirlpool that scooped them up like debris in a washing machine and dropped everything 30 feet south. A press conference in London tried to address the unfolding disasters. A minister in a soak suit said, "We assure the public that all essential services remain operational." Behind him, the roof caved in, dropping a confused seagull onto the podium. The minister stared at it, sighed, and continued, "As I was saying, operations continue." Reporters waved soaked notepads and shouted questions, none of which made sense anymore. One yelled, "Is it true that Buckingham Palace is now technically in France?" The minister blinked twice and said, "For legal reasons, no comment." Animals, already confused by humanity in normal conditions, completely lost the plot. Migratory birds overshot every landmark they had ever known. Flocks of geese landed in shopping malls, honking their displeasure at escalators. One goose chased a security guard, who shouted, "I didn't ask for this job description." Deer wandered into airports, strolling calmly down baggage claim while exhausted travelers recorded them for social media. A man picking up his luggage muttered, "Great, even the wildlife wants a vacation." Marine life ended up far from home too. Jellyfish drifted lazily down suburban cul-de-sacs. Dolphins appeared in rivers, startling fishermen who were already stressed. A fisherman in Pittsburgh dropped his beer when a dolphin poked its head up next to his boat. "What, this ain't the Gulf?" The dolphin chirped at him. "I don't care if you're lost," he snapped. "So am I." Even the insects reacted badly. Ant colonies evacuated sideways, forming weird marching bands that circled people's shoes. A woman filmed them and said, "They're unionizing, I respect that." Throughout the global catastrophe, the technician continued wandering across the landscape, tablet in hand, muttering like a tired plumber on his 15th clogged sink of the day. He stood in the middle of a street-turned ocean in Spain, typing something into his device. A local man, swimming with one arm while holding a bag of groceries above his head, sputtered, "Can you make it stop? The current is dragging my house away." The technician didn't look up. "Current realignment is 12% complete. Please remain patient." "My house is floating." "That means it is buoyant. Congratulations." In a flooded German village, a mayor shouted from a roof, "We demand to speak with whoever is in charge of this operation." The technician replied flatly, "I'd only speak with the registered owner of this planet. You are not on the list." "We're people." The technician checked his tablet. "Residents, tenants, temporary occupants, not authorized." He walked off while the mayor screamed at the sky. People began spray painting the phrase "registered owner only" on walls, as if that would somehow help. Kids turned it into a meme. Companies tried monetizing it with deniers. A shirt company released designs with the slogan, "Not the owner," apparently, complete with graphics of Earth upside down. They sold out in 6 minutes. The absurdity reached a new level when a televised town hall meeting in the U.S. attempted to address the crisis. The host asked a panel of experts, "How do we adapt to this new weather pattern?" A meteorologist threw her hands up. "This isn't weather, this is vandalism." The crowd applauded. Another panelist, a self-proclaimed climate influencer, insisted, "This is an opportunity to rethink how we engage with moisture." Someone in the audience yelled, "Shut up," and threw a soggy shoe at him. Meanwhile, citizens everywhere tried ridiculous solutions to problems that didn't have solutions. A man in Australia attempted to tape sandbags to his roof just in case gravity flips again. They fell off instantly. A family in Italy tied their furniture together with extension cords for stability. Their couch still floated away. A group in Canada attempted to capture a confused sea lion with a hockey net. The sea lion bit the net, stole a backpack, and waddled into a convenience store. Everywhere he looked, people were improvising and failing. In Chicago, 3 engineers stood on a bridge trying to figure out why the river was flowing vertically instead of horizontally. "That's not possible," one said. "It is now," another replied, watching a canoe float upward like it had someplace better to be. Nearby, a tourist asked, "Does this affect the boat tours?" All 3 engineers stared at him in exhausted silence. By mid-afternoon, world leaders attempted a video conference to coordinate their disaster responses. The connection glitched every few seconds because the satellite network kept drifting in and out of alignment. At one point, the president of Brazil appeared sideways, the prime minister of Canada appeared underwater, and the chancellor of Germany appeared entirely duplicated, with 2 versions of her arguing about fiscal priorities. Someone asked, "Can we at least agree not to panic?" Someone else screamed a no. The technician, meanwhile, used a wrench the size of a lamppost to adjust a tectonic fluctuation under Iceland. A small group of scientists shouted questions at him, but he ignored them, tapping something on his tablet like he was approving a software update. One desperate scientist yelled, "Can we please at least know the estimated repair time?" The technician responded without emotion, "No, estimated completion is classified, continue improvising." Then he vanished into a fog bank that hadn't existed 2 seconds earlier. By the end of the day, the world had devolved into a festival of absurdity. Some people had built emergency rafts out of garbage cans. Others had been swept into entirely new climates. Animals had invaded suburbs, cities, and government offices. And the technician, unbothered, uninterested, an investor, was still out there adjusting things no one wanted adjusted. It was chaos, confusion, comedy, and catastrophe, all welded together into one long, ridiculous global meltdown. And it was nowhere near over. Everyday life had become a surreal, slapstick spectacle, as if the earth had been handed off to a cosmic prankster who was particularly fond of office supplies and duct tape. Traffic had collapsed into patterns that defied both physics and common sense. Highways curled into spirals like slinkies, bridges sprouted in midair with no visible support, and roundabouts rotated independently of any road network, flinging cars into neighboring lawns, canals, or the occasional bewildered hot dog cart. Drivers leaned from windows, waving smartphones as if signaling Moscow to reality itself. "Maybe if I yell the GPS coordinates, the street will reappear," one man bellowed, clutching his car door as it gently floated 2 inches above the tarmac. Families tried to maintain routines amid the chaos, though the concept of routine had become purely theoretical. In Munich, a mother balanced on a patio chair lashed to a floating shopping cart, guiding her children through what remained of a grocery store while muttering, "Remember, kids, duct tape fixes everything except gravity." Her eldest, holding a melon that had hovered 3 feet into the air, asked, "Does it fix climate too?" She just groaned and adjusted their path as a canal suddenly bisected the parking lot, forcing her to kayak over rows of produce. Schools fared no better. In Tokyo, a middle school teacher tried to conduct a lesson as desks levitated sporadically and chalkboards pirouetted like ballerinas. "If we remain seated," maybe she began, only to be interrupted by a rabbit that had somehow fallen from a floating playground and landed on the ceiling. "Ma'am, the bunny is now the principal," the student shouted, clinging to a hovering textbook. Another raised a hand and asked, "Do we have hall passes for floating corridors?" In New York, raccoons took full advantage of the absurdity, riding dumpsters through midair like carnival rides while citizens shouted futilely. "You get back inside, that's our trash, you little devils," yelled the father, waving a coffee cup that had developed lift. Meanwhile, his youngest child laughed, gripping the edge of a recycling bin that spun like a carousel horse, shouting, "I think the raccoons are winning." Media coverage provided a surreal overlay to the unfolding chaos. Anchors in London broadcast from rooftops because streets had vanished into temporary voids. "Citizens, please not avoid what we assume is a street collapse," one reporter stammered as a deer waded past what used to be the financial district. Also, we have reports of a floating supermarket. Please don't shoplift midair. In Los Angeles, a reporter perched precariously on a floating coffee table advised, if you're indoors, evacuate to higher ground or just climb your furniture. It appears safer than the streets. A man paddled past on an inflatable flamingo, waving to the camera while shouting, "It's fine, my car is sinking, but at least I have style." Governments naturally had taken the opportunity to demonstrate their collective incompetence in spectacular fashion. Canada's civil defense announced, avoid rivers, swimming pools, and rivers in swimming pools. Mexico advised, if your house is airborne, remain calm and hold on to your dog. If you don't have a dog, borrow one from a neighbor, preferably a medium-sized dog. Berlin broadcasted, the new weather pattern may cause mild inconvenience. By mild, we mean existential dread. Proceed accordingly. Meanwhile, in the U.S., FEMA issued a 12-page infographic on how to paddle through upside-down intersections using an office chair or a cat carrier. Citizens attempted improvisation with varying degrees of success. In Paris, an elderly man strung garden hoses between buildings to create a zip line for his cats. The cats, unimpressed, jumped instead onto a floating cafe table. In Cape Town, engineers attempted to stabilize a twisting street with scaffolding, only for it to float above them while they clutched it in vain. One engineer yelled, "Is this working? There's a flamingo perched on his shoulder." His colleague, sucked from a sudden whirlpool, replied, "Yes, perfectly stabilizing." Children, of course, treated disasters as playgrounds. A fifth grader in Iowa constructed a makeshift raft from kitchen chairs and broomsticks, declaring it the official vehicle of the town council. "That's a tricycle with a chair duct taped to it," an adult shouted. "Yes," the child said proudly, "and now it's a submarine," launching it into a puddle that had mysteriously appeared overnight. Neighborhood pets frequently joined these impromptu adventures, including a raccoon that had apparently become the mayor of a floating recycling bin. Amid the absurdity, the technician moved with serene detachment. Tectonic plates were nudged like chess pieces, ocean currents adjusted with the precision of someone stirring instant coffee, and entire streets were gently rotated as if they were paper maps. He muttered complaints about the suboptimal urban layouts and the substandard gravitational coefficients, entirely indifferent to screams, protests, or amateur engineering disasters. Government delegations and curious citizens were ignored with a consistent monotony. When anyone attempted to contact him directly, his response was bureaucratic perfection. "I only speak with the registered owner of this planet. Residents, tenants, renters, and temporary occupants are not authorized." The line became a mantra, repeated in frantic whispers, posted online, and spray-painted on walls as call the owner and tenant problems. By mid-afternoon, the Earth resembled a cosmic Rube Goldberg machine. Bridges floated over lakes that had lifted themselves into the stratosphere. Highways wound into improbable loops, hotels rotated with gentle inevitability, and pets discovered streets were now slides. One man in Boston tried to fry an egg on a stove 3 feet above the floor. "Gravity, please cooperate," he shouted, dodging a floating frying pan that performed a perfect somersault midair. Animals naturally escalated the absurdity. Seagulls stole sandwiches from citizens navigating submerged intersections, ducks chased ducks across upside-down sidewalks, and a herd of reindeer in Norway treated a cinema like an obstacle course, sliding down theater seats. "Why is Santa's cavalry here?" one patron yelled. "Maybe they're renting," another replied. Even mundane tasks became perilous comedy. A baker in Rome attempted to frost a levitating cake, only to see it drift into a canal that had inexplicably appeared in the middle of a piazza. A businessman in Singapore tried to catch a taxi on a floating roundabout, waving frantically as it rotated with zero regard for passengers. In Melbourne, office workers strapped chairs together to make makeshift rafts, only to have them drift into a floating conference room where a meeting was still underway. By evening, surrealism had become routine absurdity. Duct tape, kayaks, patio furniture, and inflatable toys were standard equipment. Social media thrived on the chaos, posting endless loops of floating pets, inverted playgrounds, and airborne sandwiches, accompanied by hashtags like gravity optional, floating fails, and owner doesn't care. Citizens alternated between panic, hysterical laughter, and philosophical despair. "If we survive this," one meme proclaimed, "I vote we permanently rename gravity optional." Through it all, the technician remained a figure of mundane, cosmic boredom. Adjusting a tidal current with the casual grace of stirring coffee, he muttered, "Suboptimal hydrodynamic flow, expected improvement within 6 months." Nothing not duct tape, kayaks, coordinated chanting, or mass panic changed a single cosmic adjustment. The world's absurdity was both total and indestructible. By the end of the day, humanity existed in a state somewhere between slapstick comedy, post-apocalyptic bewilderment, and bureaucratic nightmare. Every street, river, building, and animal had the potential to defy expectation at any moment, yet people continued to attempt daily life with improvised ingenuity, panic documentation, and frantic commentary. Humor, chaos, and helplessness blended into a single, sprawling mosaic. Earth was temporarily unrecognizable, humans were spectacularly incompetent, and the technician was still out there, treating every impossibility like just another item on a planetary to-do list. By the end of this stage, the world had become a stage for absurdity, with humans frantically improvising against forces entirely beyond their control. Cities had shifted like puzzle pieces, rivers ran in unpredictable loops, and wildlife roamed where it had no business. The contrast between humanity's desperate scrambling and the technicians' calm, methodical tinkering was so stark it felt almost slapstick. In London, an official broadcast crackled over the radio. Citizens, please remain calm. If your house is currently levitating 3 meters above the Thames, do not attempt to climb down. The anchorman's voice trembled slightly, but the tone of forced authority clashed with the absurdity of the instruction. A passing crow, clearly unimpressed, swooped down and snatched his microphone. Across the street, a resident clutched his umbrella like a life raft. Did they say whether this is going to rain water or just furniture? He shouted to no one in particular. His neighbor, bouncing a floating cat carrier on her head, replied, honestly, at this point I'd accept a downpour of tax forms. Governments continued to issue instructions with increasing desperation and absurdity. Canada's Civil Defense sent a text alert: avoid rivers, swimming pools, and rivers in swimming pools. Use canoes or inflatable unicorns if necessary. In Brazil, officials declared, do not panic if your backyard now contains a small lagoon with migrating flamingos. They are harmless, mostly. Citizens read these notices aloud with incredulous tones, then proceeded to ignore every word. A man in Sao Paulo tried to herd a group of goats that had inexplicably wandered into his apartment. Okay, listen, team, if we form a single-file line, maybe we can. He was interrupted when a rogue wave from the inverted ocean flooded his living room. Well, he said, dripping wet, plan B is swim. Meanwhile, in New York, a police officer attempted to direct traffic on a street that had briefly inverted into a loop. Cars floated like balloons, pedestrians hopped from one drifting sidewalk fragment to another, and hot dog vendors shouted over the chaos. Sir, please don't try to park on a cloud, the colleague yelled. I wasn't, he replied. I'm just enjoying the new commute. People tried to use everyday objects to survive. In Tokyo, a man stood on a floating futon, paddling with a broomstick, muttering, at least my furniture's finally earning its keep. A child nearby, using an inflatable pool ring as a makeshift helmet, said, Dad, I think gravity is broken again. Across the globe, makeshift defenses emerged. In Paris, a group of citizens wrapped duct tape around their floating cars, hoping to anchor them to lampposts, only to find the lampposts had already migrated 3 blocks away. I think we just invented vehicular limbo, one said. In Sydney, engineers attempted to stabilize a bridge by stacking sandbags, plywood, and a stray kangaroo. This should work, right? One asked. Absolutely, another replied, as long as the kangaroo doesn't get any ideas. It promptly hopped away. Schools became improvisational comedy stages. In Tokyo, a teacher shouted over levitating textbooks, everyone, stay calm and pretend this is a field trip. A student yelled back, to where? The ceiling? The teacher sighed, exactly, pretend the ceiling is the field. In Boston, a man attempted to cook breakfast on a stovetop that floated 3 feet above him. Eggs wobbled in midair as he shouted, gravity, cooperate, this is an omelette, not abstract art. Meanwhile, his cat swatted at a levitating frying pan, knocking a pancake across the room. Not helping, Whiskers, he yelled. Animals only amplified the chaos. Herds of deer paraded through city squares in Moscow, ducks formed impromptu traffic control squads in Milan, and a family of raccoons in Chicago learned to ride levitating trash bins like bumper cars. One child shouted, Mom, the raccoons are winning. Her mother, balancing a floating refrigerator, replied, then maybe we'll consider negotiating peace treaties with them. In Rio, a man paddled an inflatable llama down what used to be Avenida Atlantica, dodging floating sandcastles and a carousel horse. I hate to say it, he muttered to his neighbor, but this is the most exercise I've had all year. His neighbor, perched atop an air mattress, waved, join me for synchronized swimming in my kitchen. Even governments kept escalating the absurdity. In Italy, officials broadcast, citizens are advised to secure their gondolas, which may now be flying over Milan due to unusual wind pattern. Use spaghetti noodles for emergency anchors if available. In India, civil defense added, avoid stepping on cows in floating traffic jams, no exceptions. Amid all the chaos, the technician moved like a cosmic maintenance worker inspecting a defective appliance. Adjusting tectonic plates, recalibrating currents, and nudging floating mountains, he muttered in monotone, unoptimized urban clusters expected improvement indefinite. He ignored every attempt by governments, scientists, and citizens to communicate. A delegation from the UN tried a video call. The reply was flat. I only speak with the registered owner of this planet. Residents, renters, tenants, and diplomats are ineligible. Contact the owner if you have complaints. This line became a mantra for the panicked population. It was scrawled on walls, shouted from rooftops, and hashtagged across social media. Tenant problems, call the owner, not my planet. Citizens debated feverishly who might actually qualify as a registered owner, with suggestions ranging from Elon Musk clones to sentient cockroaches that had survived 5 centuries of planetary mismanagement. By mid-afternoon, bridges had repositioned themselves over lakes that had briefly floated into the stratosphere. Highways wind in impossible loops, hotels levitated, and pet shoes vacuumed up streets as slides. People attempted to maintain work schedules, attend school, and even cook meals, but kitchen counters, office desks, and blackboards had all become mobile hazards. Citizens tried using more ludicrous solutions. In Chicago, a man tethered himself to a hot air balloon with bungee cords to stay grounded. But what could possibly go wrong? He asked. The balloon immediately drifted into a flock of geese, who seemed unimpressed. In Toronto, a woman tied herself to a lamppost using Christmas lights and duct tape. I've read somewhere this is how superheroes stay safe, she said. It did nothing. By evening, humans had fully embraced improvisation as a survival strategy. Inflatable flamingos became lifeboats, shopping carts doubled as rafts, and office chairs were pressed into service as rescue sleds. Conversations ranged from sarcastic complaints to existential humor. Did anyone else just see a tiger in the subway? Yes, and it looked like it wanted to read a newspaper. I'm starting to think duct tape is actually magical. Oh, accursed. The technician, of course, remained unimpressed. Adjusting a tidal current in the Pacific with the casual grace of someone stirring a cup of coffee, he muttered, suboptimal hydrodynamic flow, expected improvement within 6 months. Humans screamed, cried, and improvised elaborate contraptions to correct the oceans, but nothing worked. By nightfall, surreal normality had fully set in. Humans moved with a mixture of fear, resigned laughter, and improvised ingenuity. Duct tape, chairs, kayaks, inflatable toys, and sheer stubbornness were standard survival equipment. Media coverage oscillated between disbelief and absurdity, often reporting multiple disasters in a single breath. Social media comments alternated between philosophical reflection and savage mockery. The Earth had become a surreal blend of slapstick, chaos, and dark comedy. Citizens adapted as best they could, using everything at hand as a tool for survival. And somewhere above it all, the technician continued his work with complete indifference, muttering about outdated physics, unoptimized tectonics, and the inefficiency of human improvisation. Humanity's last thread of control had frayed entirely, leaving only laughter, panic, and improvisation in the face of unstoppable, bureaucratic planetary maintenance. The technician's message echoed across every device, every screen, every speaker, every hologram, and every slightly sentient appliance that could possibly receive it. You have failed to maintain your planet as prescribed in the warranty manual. This was a covered repair. Next time, it will not be under warranty. Payment will be required. The words hit like a cosmic sledgehammer. Children screamed, cats and dogs stared at the walls in mutual horror, and office workers collectively dropped their coffee caps in synchronized despair. Streets were empty because nobody could bear to leave their homes without consulting the manual that literally didn't exist. News anchors froze mid-sentence, sun spilling entire bowls of cereal, while meteorologists debated whether the weather forecasts had been at fault. In New York, a man stared at his smartphone, jaw slack. "Wait, so we already failed?" he muttered. His neighbor, standing precariously on a floating parking meter, blinked. "We didn't even know there was a manual." The man waved his hands frantically. "Exactly, there's a manual, but we've never seen it. How are we supposed to know what counts as failing?" Across the globe, families argued like apocalyptic sitcoms. In Sao Paulo, the mother accused her teenage son of neglecting planetary duties. "You didn't compost the banana peel," she shouted, brandishing a half-eaten snack like evidence. Her son, clinging to a floating bookshelf, groaned, "Mom, how would I know that banana peel management was a cosmic violation?" Governments panicked spectacularly. In Ottawa, an emergency council convened to discuss the proper protocol for interacting with the warranty manual. "Does anyone have a copy?" the minister asked. "Sir," a junior clerk replied nervously, "it's my understanding that it doesn't exist." Murmurs of disbelief and horror filled the chamber. "Non-existent manual," the minister screamed, knocking over a digital globe that rolled into a tray of pancakes. "How can they bill us for something that doesn't exist?" Meanwhile, in Tokyo, a man in a top hat tried to maintain personal decorum while pacing across his floating rooftop. "I hereby declare a planetary maintenance day," he announced. His neighbor, clutching a bag of levitating origami cranes, responded, "And what exactly are we supposed to do on this day?" "Anything," the man yelled. "Compost, sweep clouds, recite poems to trees, possibly vaccinate squirrels." Social media became a theater of absurdity. Hashtags exploded, warranty failed, cosmic bill, did I flush correctly, banana peel liability. Tutorials emerged overnight, how to apologize to your planet, synchronize grass mowing to avoid universal penalties, and bird whispering 101, reverse your migration pattern. One viral TikTok featured a man earnestly dusting a cloud with a feather duster while chanting, "I promise I'll follow the manual next time." Scientists fared no better. In Berlin, a team attempted to reverse engineer the warranty manual's requirements by observing Earth's most minor infractions. "Maybe the ocean salinity was wrong," one suggested. "No, I think it's the grass growth patterns," another insisted. They ran elaborate simulations in which randomly spinning globes collided with miniature volcanoes while high-pitched alarms emitted the sound of cosmic judgment. All predictions failed spectacularly, producing only panic and intermittent laughter. Citizens formed committees of increasingly absurd scope. In Cape Town, the Planetary Compliance Task Force convened to assign responsibilities for human, animal, and furniture management. A committee member raised a hand. "What about squirrels?" The chair, adjusting a levitating clipboard, replied, "Assign them as junior auditors. If they bite, consider it a warning from the warranty manual." In Rio, a man painted fluorescent lines around his house to prevent territorial misalignment. His neighbor protested, "That seems completely pointless." "Exactly," the painter replied, proudly. "The manual probably punishes pointless houses first." Media coverage oscillated between panic and absurd comedy. In London, an anchor announced, "Citizens are advised to maintain calm, and also please do something in accordance with the invisible warranty manual. Good luck." A cameraman floated past mid-shot, riding a street lamp like a pogo stick. Viewers assumed this was part of the instructions. At the personal level, obsessive citizens attempted impossible tasks. In Los Angeles, a woman spent hours monitoring the air quality around her floating mailbox, convinced that the warranty manual penalized per oxygen circulation. "I don't care if it makes no sense," she told her cat, "this is how I avoid cosmic fees." In Moscow, a man rearranged his furniture in precise Fibonacci sequences, muttering, "If I get audited, I want evidence that I tried." Even governments began deploying farcical initiatives. In Paris, an emergency decree required citizens to color-code their lawns according to cloud patterns. In Sydney, authorities instructed citizens to bow to each seagull passing overhead just in case bird-related infractions existed. In Toronto, officials advised, if your kitchen counters are levitating, consider attaching them with duct tape. It may or may not prevent a warranty violation. The technician, of course, remained entirely indifferent. Moving across continents with the detached efficiency of a home appliance repairman, he adjusted rivers, nudged tectonic plates, and rotated desserts as if checking off a routine maintenance checklist. He muttered in monotone, "Unoptimized nutrient flow, expected correction 72 days." He ignored every desperate message from governments, scientists, and panicked individuals. Even an entire coalition of world leaders calling in unison was met with the same curt reply. "I only speak with a registered owner of this planet. Residents, renters, tenants, and diplomats are ineligible. Contact the owner if you have complaints." This pronouncement became a global punchline. People scolded across walls, wrote it on floating drones, and whispered it while baking pies. Debate erupted over who or what might qualify as their registered owner, a billionaire, a sentient virus, the planet itself. One frustrated citizen asked aloud, "Does my goldfish count?" The answer, like the manual, remained frustratingly unknown. The panic escalated further when absurd strategies multiplied. Children organized manual compliance drills, running information while chanting phrases they believed might please the technician. Adults held synchronized sweeping events, cleaning rooftops, streets, and floating gondolas with passionate fervor. In New Delhi, a man even attempted to construct a massive umbrella over the city to prevent manual-triggered weather disasters. It collapsed immediately, crushing nothing but pride. By sunset, global paranoia had reached peak absurdity. People inspected every minor detail of their lives, whether the dishwasher cycles were aligned with moon phases, if their garden gnomes were positioned correctly, and whether their pets had uttered the proper apologetic sounds. Governments deployed fleets of drones to monitor square migration, cloud orientation, and pedestrian compliance with invisible instructions. Scientists continued elaborate experiments involving floating sand, mirrors, and chanting, all in a futile effort to decipher the non-existent rules. At the same time, humor emerged naturally from human overreaction. A man in Stockholm dressed as a tree to blend in with planetary requirements, while his neighbor wore a hat shaped like a volcano. In Los Angeles, citizens attempted to synchronize traffic jam choreographed to classical music, reasoning that coordinated chaos would satisfy the unseen manual. The resulting spectacle was televised and went viral worldwide, earning hashtags like Cosmic Choreography and Manual Mayhem. And above it all, the technician drifted, adjusting continents, oceans, and mountain ranges as casually as someone checking the oil in a car. His mottos were monotone and oddly specific: substandard tectonic alignment, ocean acidity within 0.2% deviation, expected failure threshold, 100 days. Every attempt at panicked intervention by humans was utterly meaningless, a theater of absurdity staged beneath an indifferent cosmic repairman. By nightfall, the Earth had regained temporary stability, though humanity remained utterly unmoored. Every citizen lay awake, exhausted from frantic compliance, muttering rules they had invented themselves. Governments were overwhelmed, issuing circular, contradictory mandates that no one followed. Scientists stared at screens filled with data they did not understand. The world was calm for now, but the looming threat of the next repair without warranty and with a bill attached hung over every action. Humans had learned nothing, yet they could not stop themselves from preparing for the unknowable. They scrubbed streets, inspected rooftops, measured trees, recalibrated streetlights, and begged cats and birds for forgiveness. The absurdity, panic, and dark humor were complete. Humanity was trapped in a cosmic bureaucracy responsible for a failure they had no hope of understanding. The technician, meanwhile, remained as indifferent as ever, adjusting the planet with quiet monotony, utterly unconcerned with human panic. And somewhere, far above the absurdity, a small sign on a mountain peak briefly appeared. Next repair will not be under warranty, payment will be required. The world stared, muttered, and prepared anyway. Confusion rippled across the globe like a poorly coded internet meme. Ordinary citizens attempted to interpret the technician's dire warning in ways that ranged from hilariously overzealous to complete nonsense. In Lima, a woman scribbled frantically on a whiteboard, listing what she imagined might be required by the mythical warranty manual. Step 1. Water the clouds, she muttered to her cat, who ignored her, hovering in a zero-gravity drift near the ceiling. Step 2. Apologize to migratory birds for any unintentional infractions. Step 3. Ensure all garden gnomes are aligned with the magnetic north of the nearest volcano. Step 4. Invent a planetary dance to demonstrate obedience. She looked at the cat. Yes, this makes perfect sense, don't even question it. Her neighbor, meanwhile, was outside attempting to negotiate with a flock of pigeons, waving a clipboard and shouting, "I swear we'll do better next time, please report any violations." The pigeons, unconcerned, roosted on a floating lamppost, creating a gentle aerial obstruction course. In New Delhi, a man organized a neighborhood compliance drill. He blew a whistle, sending everyone scrambling into absurd formations on floating rooftops and sidewalks. "Align your toes with the imaginary grid of the manual," he shouted. A teenage boy, balancing on a trampoline, yelled back, "Why are we following a manual nobody has seen?" The man glared. "Do you want to be responsible for planetary failure?" Social media erupted with a new kind of digital chaos. TikTok influencers filmed synchronized sweeping routines, claiming to realign tectonic energies, while Instagram live stream showed people chanting to lakes and whispering apologies to trees. Hashtags multiplied like rabbits: manual madness, fail planet, cosmic cleaning, apologize to your local square. In Paris, an elderly couple debated the correct method of manual maintenance. "You're doing it wrong," the wife said, pointing to a broom that was floating midair. "You have to sweep clockwise, not counterclockwise, otherwise the Eiffel Tower might shift again." The husband sighed, tugging at his levitating beret. "Last time we swept clockwise, the fountain ended up in our kitchen. Maybe the manual prefers randomness." In Tokyo, a man addressed a small crowd of citizens holding a large printed sign reading, "Manual Compliance Guidelines Hypothetical Edition." "If everyone chants 3 times while jumping on furniture, we'll probably maybe satisfy the technician," he proclaimed. A young woman in the audience raised her hand. "And if we don't?" "Well," he said solemnly, "I assume we die spectacularly, or possibly just get charged a large fee. Both options seem plausible." Governments, unsurprisingly, were no less absurd in their response. In Berlin, an emergency council debated for hours whether the manual could be interpreted literally or metaphorically. "We must track our rainfall in increments of 0.1 millimeters, one official demanded. Another countered, "No, it's the angle of rain that matters. Think of it as a cosmic ballet." Outside, citizens peered through windows attempting to calculate angles with protractors salvaged from schools. In Washington, D.C., a national meeting was held entirely on a floating stage in the Potomac River. "We need to prevent further planetary failure," the president intoned, gesturing to the waterlogged streets. "Deploy drones to count clouds." The Secretary of Environmental Compliance piped up. "Sir, do we also count reflections in puddles?" "Yes," the president replied, and apologized to any ducks who might feel slighted. Scientists joined the madness with progressively ridiculous experiments. In Moscow, researchers attempted to simulate the warranty manual by tying traffic cones to sand particles and observing the alignment of pigeons. One scientist muttered, "If the pigeons land in a perfect Fibonacci sequence, we may have avoided cosmic retribution." His colleague adjusted a small mirror to redirect sunlight toward a miniature model volcano. "This simulates planetary gratitude," she said seriously. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens improvised their own solutions. In Rio, a man mounted a series of oscillating fans on his roof, reasoning maybe wind speed compliance is part of the manual. A neighbor shouted over the whirring blades, "Why are you flying your cat through this?" The man paused, considering. Maybe the cat is a compliance officer. We shouldn't risk non-conformance. In Cape Town, a local planetary committee tried to assign specific maintenance duties to random animals. A committee member scribbled on a chalkboard, "Monkeys street repair, pigeons traffic signals, cats document moral infractions." Another member muttered, "And who watches the humans?" The first shrugged. Apparently, the technician, also possibly the goldfish. Even children got involved. In Chicago, a group of middle schoolers staged a manual compliance obstacle course, involving floating desks, overturned chairs, and a particularly uncooperative hamster in a hamster ball. One child shouted, "If we make it to the finish without dropping a stapler, we are officially compliant." Another yelled back, "Does this include my little brother?" The first child hesitated, then declared, "He's optional, but it's risky." Meanwhile, the technician went about his work with his usual indifferent precision. Adjusting tectonic plates, shifting ocean currents, and nudging weather patterns, he muttered occasionally about substandard gravitational coefficients or inefficient urban layouts, entirely unconcerned with the chaos below. He ignored messages, pleas, and viral videos of humans performing bizarre dances on rooftops, floating with shopping carts, or apologizing to inanimate objects. A particularly desperate delegation of scientists attempted a final approach via quantum communications. "Please, technician, we want to understand what we did wrong," the lead scientist pleaded. The reply, delivered with the same monotone as ever, was brutally simple. "I only speak with the registered owner of this planet. Residents, tenants, renters, and government representatives are ineligible. Contact the owner if you have complaints." This declaration became the absurd mantra of humanity. People wrote it on walls, spray-painted it on floating cars, and whispered it while performing synchronized broom sweeps. Conspiracy theories emerged instantly. Maybe the registered owner was a billionaire, a sentient AI, or a particularly patient raccoon. One viral video showed a man kneeling before his fish tank, muttering, "If the goldfish is the owner, I swear I'll comply." Attempts at compliance multiplied exponentially. In Sydney, citizens constructed elaborate apology platforms consisting of bamboo scaffolding, duct tape, and floating umbrellas. Each person had a checklist of imagined violations to correct. "Did I brush the clouds correctly today?" the one asked nervously. "Did my cat look guilty enough? Did I wave to a tree at the right angle?" In London, a man decided to train streetlights to rotate correctly. "If they are aligned, surely the technician will notice," he explained to his neighbor. The neighbor nodded absently while balancing a garden gnome on his head. "I hope so," she said. "I think my gnome failed yesterday," it twitched. The absurdity escalated further as synchronized dance routines became mandatory in towns attempting to prevent cosmic fees. In Boston, a small orchestra conducted movements while citizens marched in spirals around lampposts. One child paused mid-step. "Is this really helping?" The conductor glared. "Yes, or at least it feels official." By nightfall, humanity had reached peak hysteria. People scrubbed sidewalks, apologized to stray animals, balanced books on their heads to ensure alignment, and debated in forums whether one could overcomply. Governments were issuing circular, contradictory orders. If you see a cloud, wave. If you don't, wave anyway. If the technician is watching, double wave. Scientists held impromptu conferences in floating laboratories, arguing over whether grass color, square behavior, or the trajectory of flying newspapers determined planetary liability. And through it all, the technician adjusted continents, currents, and climates as casually as someone flipping a light switch. Mutters of an optimized sediment flow and substandard atmospheric calibration punctuated his movements. Nothing humans did mattered. The world below had become a theater of absurd compliance rituals, improvised by citizens desperate to appease a completely indifferent cosmic bureaucrat. By midnight, Earth was calm for now, but humanity remained in frantic motion, obsessively performing tasks they believed might prevent the next failure. Checklists, dances, apologies, and extreme home inspections continued. Social media was ablaze with viral clips of compliance efforts, each more ridiculous than the last. People feared what the next repair might bring, and the possibility of payment for failures hovered over every decision. Humanity was united in confusion, absurdity, and frantic devotion to an unseen, unknowable standard. The technician, as always, remained entirely unimpressed. Guilt had metastasized across humanity like a particularly persistent computer virus. No one knew where the warranty manual was, if it even existed, or what the hell counted as a failure. The original or legal owner of the planet was unknown, uncontactable, and probably laughing somewhere while citizens burned themselves out trying to appease cosmic bureaucracy. Everyone assumed they were already failing catastrophically, and panic metastasized into full-blown absurdity. In London, a council meeting convened in what had once been the House of Commons. The floor was now 6 feet above the surrounding streets after some minor tectonic adjustments. "Do we know where the manual is?" asked one beleaguered MP, juggling a floating teacup and his notes. "No idea," replied another, as a pigeon swooped past carrying what looked like the last remaining printed map of the city. "If there is a manual, someone probably ate it." Outside, citizens attempted to improvise their own versions. A man on a bicycle pedaled in spirals through the park, shouting, "I'm training the atmosphere. I think that counts as compliance." A woman nearby held a clipboard in a bag of compost. "I've rearranged all the leaves by size and color. Hopefully, the technician notices." Her neighbor leaned over from a levitating bench. "Which technician? And is it the original one or a replacement? Because if it's a replacement, they might not like your color coding." In Tokyo, a neighborhood watch group formed the Manual Search Task Force. Armed with binoculars, metal detectors, and questionable logic, they combed the streets, rooftops, and canals for any trace of the fabled document. "We must find the manual," the leader announced, gesturing to a floating notebook that had somehow become a symbolic placeholder. "Without it, we're doomed." A volunteer whispered, "Do we even know who owns the planet? Maybe we're looking for the wrong guy." "Does anyone here have any idea what a registered owner is supposed to look like?" Another replied, raising a stick at an angry crow perched nearby. "I think it's supposed to be very rich and possibly invisible," muttered a third. "Either that or a particularly judgmental raccoon." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the president held a press conference from the White House roof, which had slowly floated above the National Mall. "Citizens," he said, gesturing to the floating fountains, drifting statues, and airborne hot dog stands, "we do not know where the warranty manual is. We do not know who the registered owner of this planet is, and we do not know if following the rules will even help, but we are committed to compliance." Our reporter shouted, "Sir, how do we comply if we don't know the rules?" "Excellent question," the president replied with unconvincing enthusiasm. "Step 1, look like you care. Step 2, apologize to the clouds. Step 3, wave at birds continuously until further notice." The reporter muttered to a cameraman, "I think we're doomed." In Berlin, a task force convened on the principle that more observation equals better compliance. They installed webcams on every street, lamppost, and floating mailbox to monitor rainfall, pedestrian movement, and squirrel interactions. "If the technician can see everything, then maybe we're safe," one official reasoned. Another added, "Or we'll be charged more if we miss something." In Paris, citizens obsessed over minor infractions. A man carefully straightened every sidewalk crack with chalk. "I read online that uneven pavements might count as a violation," he muttered. His neighbor shook her head while balancing a garden gnome on her shoulder. "And what about my cat? Did it step on the pavement last week? Is that a cosmic infraction?" In Cape Town, engineers attempted climate manipulation with a mixture of duct tape umbrellas and an elaborate pulley system. "If we can redirect wind currents, maybe we can please the technician," said one. "Or maybe we'll just make the next disaster worse," replied his colleague, floating precariously on a half-inflated mattress. Meanwhile, children everywhere interpreted the situation in ways far more practical and terrifying. In Chicago, a group of fifth graders convened to assign guilt. "It was probably the adults' fault," one declared. "Yeah," another agreed, "but someone needs to supervise the squaws. They might be failing the planet silently." Families adopted routines of extreme observation. In Lima, a father documented every sneeze of his dog, convinced an unnoticed allergic reaction could result in catastrophic planetary fines. "Did you sneeze at the right angle, Fido?" he asked. The dog, unconcerned, wagged its tail, inadvertently knocking over a floating teacup. "Goddamn it," the father muttered. "Non-compliance, I can feel it in my bones." Social media erupted in absurdity. People posted step-by-step tutorials on how to locate the invisible manual, debate the identity of the owner, and perform synchronized compliance dances in their living rooms. Hashtags multiplied exponentially: find the owner, manual mystery, square obedience, apologize to clouds. Viral clips showed people trying to bribe pigeons, organize floating traffic cones, and petition their neighbors to align their furniture according to an unknown cosmic code. In Moscow, a scientist attempted to model human compliance mathematically. If everyone arranges their furniture according to an arbitrary pattern, multiplies it by the number of unseen violations, and adds the negative square root of guilt, maybe we can avoid catastrophe, she said. Her assistant sighed, or we'll just end up dizzy and broke. Governments issued increasingly preposterous mandates. In Brazil, an emergency broadcast instructed, all citizens must stand on one foot and hum the national anthem to realign tectonic plates. If you do not have a foot, borrow one from a neighbor. If you do not have a neighbor, imagine one. In Japan, the government advised, please document all bird flights above 5 feet, rotate your furniture yearly, apologize to rivers for any prior infractions. In Sydney, an amateur planetary compliance officer held a seminar on proper etiquette for the unseen owner. If the owner is watching, she explained, you must bow 3 times per day, twice if you only suspect they are watching. If you are sure, perform a full somersault. The audience of 5 watched attentively while holding cats, umbrellas, and floating potted plants. Citizens debated the ethics of overcompliance versus undercompliance. If I apologize too much, will it backfire? Asked a man in Rome holding a model volcano. His neighbor nodded gravely. Possibly. I've been apologizing to my mailbox since breakfast. The technician might think I'm mocking them. Even at the global scale, absurd measures dominated. In Canada, emergency councils debated whether apologizing to moose was necessary. Do we count all moose, or only those seen in the last 24 hours? One official asked. Does it matter if they're frozen in ice? Asked another. Probably, the first replied. The manual is very specific about frozen moose. The technician, naturally, remained indifferent. Adjusting the orbit of minor islands, nudging ocean currents, and shifting cloud formations, he muttered occasionally about unoptimized compliance factors and substandard human prioritization. No matter the frantic dances, inspections, apologies, or calculations, he remained unimpressed. By the end of the day, the planet itself was stable, if only temporarily. Humanity, however, had reached peak absurdity. Families tracked rainfall with laser pointers, governments argued over imaginary violations, and children debated the guilt of squaws. Everyone simultaneously feared and revered a cosmic authority that could neither be located, understood, nor contacted. The next repair, promised to be outside the warranty, loomed as a horrifying specter over every decision. Dark humor and extreme sarcasm dominated the zeitgeist. No one knew where the manual was, if it existed, or who owned the planet. Every action rational, irrational, or entirely ridiculous was performed under the assumption that it might matter. And yet, the technician, unmoved by human obsession, continued his work with unshakable detachment, leaving a planet of frantic, foolish, and completely powerless citizens in his wake. By the end, humanity had achieved a level of panic previously thought unattainable. People were simultaneously exhausted, over-caffeinated, and hypervigilant, scanning the skies for signs of impending repair while rearranging furniture to comply with unknown cosmic regulations. Governments had dissolved into chaotic coordination committees, issuing contradictory mandates like apologize to the clouds yearly and ensure all pets are floating at least 3 feet above ground to demonstrate good stewardship. Scientists stared at their computers, blinking at simulations that predicted everything and nothing, their equations spinning into infinite loops while someone in the lab whispered, maybe the manual isn't written in a language we can read or perhaps in invisible ink, or maybe TOG, just forget it. Families argued in surreal domestic theater. In Rome, a father dragged his children around the living room holding an inflatable kite like it was a holy relic. Quick, we must relocate the cat, the technician might be watching. His eldest rolled her eyes. Dad, how do you know he's even paying attention? What if the repair already counted as failure? The father's face turned ghostly pale. Then we're all financially liable for the next one. In New Delhi, neighbors held a spontaneous manual interpretation debate, shouting over each other from floating rooftops. I say it means no pollution ever, for any reason. I say it requires synchronized dance ceremonies during solar eclipses. To know, it's obviously about furniture arrangement, vertical alignment only. One man paused to adjust the tilt of his couch. If I fail at this, will the oceans come after me personally? Social media had become an infernal carnival of advice, rumor, and hysteria. Clips went viral of entire families apologizing to trees, submitting weekly reports on square behavior, or staging synchronized duck formations in city fountains. Hashtags multiplied like some self-aware virus, manual madness, owner who apologized to everything, duct tape for humanity. Memes suggested bribing the technician with interpretive dance or sending postcards to planet owner somewhere in the cosmos. Comment sections became philosophical treatises on guilt. I moved my couch 3 degrees clockwise at 3:17 a.m. Does that count? Governments went beyond absurdity. In Canada, Civil Defense released a statement. All citizens must line up alphabetically by first name sunrise. Failure may result in tectonic penalties. Mexico instructed, if you do not have a dog to apologize on your behalf, borrow a neighbor's cat. If unavailable, stand in silence while waving an inflatable flamingo. Meanwhile, the United Nations convened via hologram, only to find that the Assembly Hall had drifted 17 feet into the stratosphere. The Secretary-General muttered, I think we may be failing again. Citizens' paranoia peaked. People began obsessively recording the direction of bird flights, the precise tilt of lampposts, and the number of leaves falling from trees. A woman in Tokyo lined up every utensil in her kitchen with military precision. If the technician notices one crooked spoon, it could be catastrophic. Her husband, crouched under a floating table, muttered, we should just leave him a note apologizing for all failures in advance. Children, naturally, were the most horrifyingly calm. In Minneapolis, a 5th grader organized a failure audit for the neighborhood squares, assigning points for improper acorn storage. If we get enough points, maybe the planet won't explode next time, he explained seriously. Parents watched helplessly, realizing the children had instinctively adapted to absurdity far better than anyone else. Some people tried extreme legalistic measures. In London, a lawyer drafted a 47-page petition demanding proof of ownership of Earth and a copy of the warranty manual. Until we see the original contract, I refuse to accept liability, he declared. His assistant whispered, Sir, the manual might not exist, and the owner might be dead or imaginary. The lawyer nodded solemnly. Then we sue anyway. And yet, the technician remained entirely unmoved. Adjusting minor tectonic plates as casually as someone folding laundry, nudging ocean currents with a flick of the wrist, he muttered under his breath, unoptimized human compliance, expected improvement, negligible. He ignored the emails, calls, petitions, and interpretive dances with perfect, terrifying efficiency. No pleading, no bribing, no synchronized duck formation could earn him even a glance. By evening, the world was stable for the moment. Streets, buildings, and wildlife no longer drifted midair, but the knowledge of the next intervention not under warranty hung like a blade over every decision. Humanity had not learned, not really. They had merely perfected absurdity. Parents apologized to chairs, bureaucrats debated the ethical treatment of pigeons, children audited the behavior of squirrels, and every social media user documented the smallest possible perceived misstep, just in case. The final unspoken horror and comedic brilliance was this: the planet might have been temporarily calm, but every precaution, every ritual, every frantic, utterly useless action taken by humanity had only highlighted their impotence. The technician's message wasn't a threat in the conventional sense, it was a cosmic instruction manual for panic. They were left simultaneously prepared, unprepared, overworked, hyper-observant, and utterly powerless, caught in a loop of compliance theater that had no reward, no recognition, and no hope of relief. In other words, they were doing everything wrong and, somehow, exactly as expected. The technician, invisible, distant, and perfect in his indifference, adjusted a minor cloud formation. Suboptimal human behavior, expected outcome, maximum chaos, billing details to follow. And somewhere, in the quiet of his cosmic maintenance closet, he smiled or something approximating it.
Thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, comment or review, and tell your friends if you liked it. All my books are available from Amazon and other book retailers. Buy an ebook and show your support.